Chapter 1254. Seeing this, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He knew that there must be something else hidden here. The other demon gods were strange, so he wasn't in a hurry. Instead, he squinted his eyes and looked in front of him. Little iron egg, stabilize your body. Don't be scared. This thing is just a way to deal with us in this situation. After Lin Yuan finished speaking, Little Iron Egg's body became even more unstable. He wasn't familiar with controlling the seven-colored cloud, so his movements became jerky at this moment. Master, don't scare me. He was clearly not used to this method of walking on the waves on the sea. He even started to make mistakes again and again, almost falling into the sea. Lin Yuan just smiled. He knew that Little Iron Egg hadn't been tested enough. This situation was the perfect opportunity to test him. Therefore, he didn't hesitate at all. Gradually, at the moment of this change, Lin Yuan had already stretched out his hand and grabbed Little Iron Egg in front of him. Control your emotions. Don't be scared by the scene in front of you. Otherwise, you won't be able to participate in the battle later. After saying this, Little Iron Egg couldn't control his emotions anymore. Under such circumstances, it was already difficult for him to control his body. However, Lin Yuan's words made him lose his patience. Lin Yuan just shook his head when he saw this. However, the waves started to become more and more violent. It seemed that something under the water was desperately causing trouble for them and even wanted to overturn them. Lin Yuan didn't say anything. His eyes were fixed on the water. He knew that the thing hidden under the water was definitely not that simple. At least, in his opinion, it definitely wouldn't be easy to deal with it. The demon god's heart had already caused such a big commotion. Now, he could feel that no matter what happened at this moment, there should be traces to follow. However, all of a sudden, a tentacle stretched out. Lin Yuan frowned slightly. Why did this thing look so much like the special demon king he had fought before? It was the octopus demon king. He suddenly stretched out his hand and directly grabbed the tentacle. However, when he touched the tentacle suddenly sprayed out a kind of purple-red ink. Just by looking at its color, one could tell that it was highly toxic. However, Lin Yuan did use his own seven-colored light to form a light barrier, covering his hand and blocking the opponent's attack. Little Bruiser clenched his fists when he saw this. He knew from the very beginning that his appearance would bring trouble to his master, so he was able to remain calm. He wasn't too flustered and had even calmed down a bit. He didn't say a word as he stood on the seven-colored halo. Lin Yuan had indeed broken a tentacle. The moment he stretched out his hand, the tentacle of the octopus broke. It seemed that the octopus knew that it was no match for him. Lin Yuan clearly felt that these guys were cunning. If he really let them go on like this, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape from here. When he thought of this, he didn't hesitate at all. This time, he was prepared to cover his whole body with the seven-colored light and plunge into the water. He wanted to see what was exerting pressure on him. However, the moment he covered his body with the seven-colored light, the waves directly slapped him like a golden wave. Not only him, but also Little Bruiser beside him. Lin Yuan also arranged a seven-colored light on Little Bruiser's body in the midst of the chaos. Only then did he know that this light could protect Little Bruiser's life. When he thought of this, he didn't hesitate at all. At this moment, he directly stepped out and dived into the sea. At this moment, he discovered that there were actually countless strange creatures under the water staring at him. He was also a little puzzled. He didn't react in time, right? What was going on? In his opinion, these underwater creatures shouldn't be so aggressive. However, when his gaze fell on the eyes of these underwater monsters, he knew that they must be controlled by the so-called demon god's body. This was because their eyes were flickering with a scarlet color. This scarlet color was the same as the color emitted by the demon god's heart. Seeing that he had already fallen into the encirclement, Lin Yuan was not nervous at all. He even felt that this so-called stranger was more or less a bit low. However, this method of controlling these sea creatures was really too low level. However, just as he was thinking about this, an extremely huge force suddenly enveloped Lin Yuan's body. Rather than saying that it was an enormous power, it would be more accurate to say that it was a massive shadow. The reaction was so huge that he didn't even have the intention to completely avoid it. He couldn't even avoid the shadow because the shadow was so huge that it had already covered a large area of the sea. At this moment, that guy suddenly opened his mouth, and a huge suction force directly appeared in the water. Even the water and Lin Yuan were sucked into the giant's mouth. Lin Yuan frowned slightly. With the protection of the colorful light, there was no problem at all. However, he didn't know what kind of creature he was in, but looking at the gorgeous internal organs and skin around him, he didn't know. He knew that this guy was at least a few dozen meters away. However, he suddenly had some special thoughts. Such a big thing, if he ate it, he was afraid that it would take a long time. However, he immediately erased this idea from his heart because the smell here was really not good. At this moment, at the moment when he was about to penetrate this guy's stomach, he found that there were shining gems one after another in this guy's stomach. These gems should be the essence of this thing's cultivation. Although Lin Yuan had no need for these things, and he didn't care about such things, Little Iron Egg really needed these things now. Lin Yuan didn't have any other thoughts at this time. He took a step forward and was ready to dig out a stone from this guy's body. However, when his hand touched this guy's internal organs, he found that something was wrong. Chapter 12:55. Because the moment his hand touched this guy's body, it was as if there was a huge suction force sucking out the power in his body. It felt as if a needle had pierced into his body and extracted some blood. Lin Yuan's expression was a little ugly. He didn't expect that he would meet such a difficult guy and fail miserably at such an easy task. However, this gave him a special idea. Little Iron Egg was probably still lacking a set of armor. If he could kill this thing and use its body parts to make armor for Little Iron Egg, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Lin Yuan was angry when he thought of this. He tried to use the colorful light in his body to cut the monster's internal organs. However, he didn't expect the monster's internal organs to be so tough. Even he couldn't cut them open. The most important thing is that at this moment, without the slightest sign, this guy, that is, the body of this behemoth, actually began to twist, and then his internal organs also wriggled, as if to directly crush Lin Yuan. This made him feel a little passive, because at this moment, all his thoughts had already landed on this guy. After checking and understanding the situation, he should have a 90% chance of succeeding. However, he didn't expect to make such a mistake. Lin Yuan gently held his cheek with one hand. He was thinking about what to do next. He could clearly feel the strength of the monster's internal organs. He could even clearly feel that the monster was shrinking step by step, as if it was going to crush him. Lin Yuan suddenly took out the demon god's heart. This thing was so powerful. It must have something to do with the stranger's restaurant. However, the moment he took out the demon god's heart, the surrounding stones all rushed toward the heart in his hand. There was no need to dig them out. It was as if they belonged to the heart. Lin Yuan's expression froze. What's going on? He suddenly realized a problem. This seemed to be the demon god's blood. When the blood returned to the heart, it made the strange heart stronger. Lin Yuan didn't expect that taking out the strange heart would have such a benefit. However, he couldn't care less now. Since the strange heart worked, and the monster had this type of blood, he didn't hesitate to gather all of them together. At least this was of some use to him. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan, you will directly start to swim in the body of this giant. Of course, he knew that if he wasn't careful at this moment, he might not encounter any danger, but he would miss out on the things inside. He didn't want to get his hands on an incomplete demon god. He couldn't afford to lose even a little bit. Therefore, at this moment, he didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation. He almost went to every corner of this guy. Although this guy would absorb his power, after a while, he would use the power of this demon god's heart on himself. This was a balance. The monster would absorb his power, and the strange heart would absorb the monster's power. In the end, the heart would send the power to him. This was equivalent to a cycle. It was just a waste of one more process. Lin Yuan didn't think that the demon god's heart was the only thing in this place. Looking at the state of the previous layer, there should be some special secrets hidden in this place. For example, one of the demon god's bodies. However, he didn't know where the demon god's body was. He didn't know which part of the strange body was sealed in this layer. Therefore, it was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. But just as he was deep in thought, he suddenly felt a clear impact coming from outside. Lin Yuan was a little puzzled. Logically speaking, in this place, in such a deep sea, such a behemoth should not be attacked. But why was there something constantly attacking him, and why was it that this huge monster was reaching out? Suddenly, he thought of something. It was very likely to be Little Iron Egg. Although this guy had always been a little timid, he was always able to erupt with indescribable power at critical moments. Lin Yuan finally didn't want to hold back anymore. He knew that if he let Little Iron Egg continue to hit him, this kid wouldn't be able to withstand the squeezing power of the monster's internal organs, even if he had the protection of his rainbow energy. If this little disciple of his really died, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Without any hesitation, he rushed out of the room. At this moment, he didn't hold back anymore. He punched the monster's inner skin from the inside. He didn't hesitate anymore. He was afraid that something would happen to his little disciple. If that happened, it would be difficult to deal with. Moreover, he only used his physical strength this time. He didn't borrow any other power. Therefore, even if the monster wanted to absorb the energy in his body, it wouldn't be able to do so. Seeing that it was being attacked from two sides, the monster finally couldn't hold back anymore. Then, a stream of stinky liquid gushed out of its body. Lin Yuan originally wanted to smash the monster into pieces with his punches. However, he didn't expect that the monster would be so disgusting as to expel the stinky and sour digestive liquid. He didn't hesitate anymore. This time, he directly punched the monster's skin with the rainbow light. Then he exerted his strength. In an instant, the monster's skin and flesh exploded. Then, a stream of blood gushed out of the monster's body. The seawater outside also washed away its internal organs at this moment. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and slowly walked out of the monster's body step by step. Outside was Little Iron Egg. However, the rainbow light on his body had become extremely dim, as if it was about to disappear. Lin Yuan smiled dotingly. "Silly boy, how can you be a match for him?" The moment he saw Lin Yuan, Little Iron Egg's face lit up with surprise. "Master, you're really here." After saying this, he couldn't hold back his emotions anymore. He directly pounced on Lin Yuan. At this moment, Lin Yuan just waved his hand gently. A light green light enveloped Little Iron Egg's body. Chapter 1256. The moment he saw Lin Yuan, a look of surprise appeared on Little Iron Egg's face. "Master, you're really here." After saying this, he couldn't hold back his emotions and directly rushed towards Lin Yuan. At this moment, Lin Yuan just waved his hand gently, and a light green light directly enveloped Little Iron Egg's body. "No matter what you want to say now, you can swallow it back." This sentence made Little Iron Egg feel strange. He directly rushed in to save him without caring about his own safety. Why was his master treating him so coldly now? Little Iron Egg didn't seem to understand what was going on at all. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan knew that Little Iron Egg had misunderstood. Because he knew that Little Iron Egg was with him, the two of them didn't have the leisure to care about love at all. There were many huge sea creatures around them. At this moment, Lin Yuan already knew that this underwater world was unusual. But he didn't expect Little Iron Egg to misunderstand him at this time. At this moment, a violent current directly swept towards the two of them. Lin Yuan directly pulled Little Iron Egg and dodged. Then he said indifferently, "Now is not the time to talk about this. There are still some special things here that we haven't dealt with yet." When he finished speaking, he had already rushed to the side. There were a few fishes that had grown human arms and bodies. These guys looked very powerful, but for some reason, Lin Yuan felt that they had a very similar aura to the devil god from before. It was as if these things were born from the devil god. However, Lin Yuan still frowned. He knew that the matter of the eye was definitely not that simple, but at this moment, he was already prepared. His movements began to become swift and fierce, and the surrounding special fish began to attack them on their own accord. Lin Yuan frowned. Although these guys' attack power wasn't strong, their attacks were extremely troublesome. Moreover, every attack could create a whirlpool underwater. Lin Yuan knew that the whirlpool was their attack method. They were doing this to disrupt his attack method. It was also to distract his attention. Little Iron Egg, listen to me. These guys are not the ones who are mainly attacking us. There are other powerful creatures around us. Lin Yuan didn't hesitate. After saying this, he was about to do something else. But he didn't know when he was trapped in a cage made of water. Lin Yuan didn't seem to be able to react. They didn't expect these underwater creatures to have such intelligence. In such a situation, they had actually unleashed their most powerful strength. Furthermore, they had used a group attack to trap him here. Not only him, but even Little Bruiser had not been able to escape the calamity. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan's eyes slightly narrowed slightly. He could clearly see that these guys in front of him weren't just using this special method to attack. They were using the power of the sea. Lin Yuan frowned slightly. He naturally knew that in this situation, no matter what he did, there was no way to escape from here. The only thing he could do was to use force to break through. At that moment, waves after waves of water surged towards him. Little Iron Egg now understood why his master had told him not to speak. In this kind of crisis, speaking would only distract him. Therefore, Lin Yuan knew that they were doing this for his own good. When he thought of this, he couldn't speak. He could only stand there silently. All right, I didn't expect that you guys would actually have such a method. However, if you think that this is enough to deal with me, you're underestimating me too much. After he finished speaking, he took a step forward without any hesitation. Right at this moment, the cage-like stream of water that had been condensed to the side had already been confined to the ground. It seemed like it wanted to firmly trap him there. Every movement he made would cause the water around him to resist. The resistance was very clear and powerful. Lin Yuan had never thought that he would encounter such a situation. However, he quickly calmed down and squinted his eyes as he looked at everything before him. Nobody responded to him, because all the creatures in the water were looking at him with extreme vigilance. In their eyes, this human was their mortal enemy. And the behemoth that should have been lurking here has not appeared yet. At least, Lin Yuan felt that this guy was more powerful than the other behemoths. He did not know how many times. Furthermore, he could sense that this creature had been waiting for him all this time. It clearly had ulterior motives. Lin Yuan's eyes started to look around. He knew that there was definitely something special in this place. However, this creature had yet to appear, which made him more or less puzzled. However, he immediately became vigilant because he felt that the changes in the water were becoming more obvious. The waves and vibrations seemed like something was about to come out from a certain direction. Little Iron Egg, who was watching from the side, was also a little nervous. "Master, do you want me to release the Sky Dance Azuras and have a bloody battle with them?" Lin Yuan shook his head. Although these creatures looked extremely ferocious, they couldn't do much in the water. Moreover, their methods weren't used underwater. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes. He had already come up with a countermeasure, but he was prepared to go deeper. He wanted this creature to come out by itself. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan's hand didn't even emit a bit of light. It was as if he didn't care about his surroundings at all. At that moment, a tall tortoise or a stone tablet slowly crawled over from not far away. The tortoise's movements seemed to be very slow, but with every step it took, its figure would leave behind afterimages. This thing should be the real deal. Lin Yuan smiled slightly. He had already seen the tortoise carrying the stone tablet. Chapter 1257. Lin Yuan wasn't nervous when he saw the old man, and he even had a smile on his face. However, Little Iron Egg wasn't as calm as Wang Yao. In his opinion, the behemoth-like old man in front of him was so powerful that it was terrifying. The old man's aura wasn't something that he could contend with. He even felt like he was just a little bug crawling under the other party's feet. Lin Yuan didn't have much to do, so he just quietly watched the old man approach him. He also absorbed all the pressure from the wall of water beside him. Finally, the old turtle said, "Do you think you can fight against us in a place like this? In the water, us water races are invincible." When the old turtle said this, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of water. The water was like a sharp sword, rushing towards Lin Yuan and Little Iron Egg. Seeing this, Little Iron Egg snorted and clenched his fists. He took a step forward and punched out. The water flow seemed to be unable to withstand his punch and had already begun to appear. The depression had even formed a vacuum at this moment. However, Little Iron Egg was still too weak. At least, he was far from being able to compete with the behemoth in front of him. Lin Yuan directly fell in front of Little Iron Egg. Finally, the water collided with Lin Yuan's power. At this moment, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate at all. He directly took a step forward. Old Wang, right? Do you really think that you're invincible when you're down there? I can tell you clearly that no matter what you think, you can't realize it at this moment, even if you think that you are an aquatic race. After Lin Yuan finished speaking, he fiercely clenched his fist. Then, outside the wall of water, a 7-colored light began to bloom. He had already prepared a backup plan. At this moment, he didn't hesitate at all and directly activated his hidden means. At this moment, the old turtle was also shocked. He didn't expect the human in front of him to be so terrifying, and it wasn't over yet. Lin Yuan just slammed the ground, and then a scorching heat rose up, and the space they were in instantly turned into a vacuum. Or rather, all the water was sucked away. The old turtle was also stunned for a moment. He didn't know how many years it had been since he went ashore. At this moment, he seemed to feel a little flustered as the water flow left him. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly. Without any hesitation, he stepped out of the world and punched the old turtle's shell fiercely. He could see that there must be something special about the 10 times, but he didn't want to think about it now. He just wanted to do his best to deal with this old turtle in front of him. After all, from his point of view, although it seemed like he was the one who was attacked and trapped, he knew that this guy's strongest point was his defense. Attacking wasn't his forte, and if he wanted to get through this, he had to defeat this guy. Moreover, he could also see that this guy in front of him should have the strength of 2 demon kings. Lin Yuan had just punched out, and the old turtle narrowed his eyes in an instant. Then, Lin Yuan clearly saw layers of water flow begin to cover this guy's body, as if forming a layer of armor for him. Lin Yuan's attack was like a clay ox entering the sea. Seeing this change, Little Iron Egg's expression changed, because he could see that his master's current attack method didn't seem to be enough to destroy this guy in front of him. What could he do? He didn't have the strength to deal with this guy in front of him at all. If he really acted hastily, he was afraid that he would cause trouble for his master. Just as he was hesitating, Lin Yuan suddenly stretched out his hand and pointed at the stone tablet. Old turtle, I know that this 10 times is your lifeblood, and it's where the array formation is. If you still want to fight to the death with us, I will not hesitate to shatter this stone tablet of yours. At that time, everything here will be destroyed, and even you will disappear. Given Lin Yuan's experience, how could he not know that this guy in front of him must have some special problems? These problems appeared on the stone tablet. He also clearly felt that the demon god's heart in his hand had given him a hint at this moment. There must be another body of the demon god in this old turtle's body. Therefore, it was not convenient for him to directly kill this old turtle in front of him. He wanted to dig out the truth of this old turtle bit by bit. After all, this guy was not as simple as the armor and weapons he had seen before. He was just a weapon spirit, and he had been controlled by the demon god's heart. The old turtle in front of him was obviously a demon king. Therefore, he wanted to change to other methods and means, at least it wouldn't take so much effort. However, just as he was thinking about this, the old turtle snorted coldly. If you want to say that, then I have to thank you because I don't want to carry this equipment for the rest of my life. I don't know how many unfair things I've encountered because of this equipment. If you can, why don't you help me? It was obvious from what this guy said and did at this moment that he was messing with Lin Yuan's mentality. Seeing this scene, he just said softly, "In that case, I'll help you dissect it." When Lin Yuan finished speaking, he had already taken a step forward, because he could feel that the old tortoise that appeared in front of him at this moment was ready to attack. Suddenly, waves began to surge in front of him. The mist had long disappeared, and at this moment, Lin Yuan found that this guy could actually use the water to penetrate the vacuum defense he had set up and directly rush in. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. Good. I didn't expect you to have such a method. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony. After saying this, a brilliant sword appeared in his hand. At this moment, he directly held this sword in his hand and slashed the old turtle's shell in front of him, creating sparks. It was as if he had gone mad as he continued to attack without stopping. Chapter 1258. Lin Yuan then said to Little Iron Egg, "Kid, watch carefully. This is the Willow Sword Dance of the Wind. Although it's not a profound sword art, it should be the best for you to use it in your current state. Watch carefully." After he finished speaking, he took a step forward without any hesitation. Cold light flashed. The old turtle didn't have any means to restrain the guy in front of him, so he could only control himself and the flow of water around him. He could only defend. For him, this kind of attack had already broken through his cognition, and at this moment, Lin Yuan was only using 30% of his strength. Of course, this was to let Little Iron Egg learn this technique. He clearly knew that this guy's defense must be outstanding. The Willow Sword Dance of the Wind was actually suitable for Little Iron Egg's current sword art. That was why he took this opportunity to launch an attack with such a perfect sandbag. Little Iron Egg, who was next to him, was even more entranced. He didn't expect his master to be so powerful that he could still make such a move under such circumstances. Even that guy who could suppress him with just his aura didn't seem to have any power to fight back against his master's opponent. He was completely captivated by her beauty. It was because he had never seen such a constitution and method before. Moreover, he could clearly feel that at this moment, there should have been other ways to restrain his master. However, for some reason, the old fox just lay on the ground obediently and didn't dare to make the slightest move. Lin Yuan frowned slightly when he saw this. He still wants to resist. He had originally thought that he could use this opportunity to let Little Iron Egg learn more, but he hadn't expected that the old tortoise would actually think of another way. At this moment, rays of golden light flashed on the old tortoise's shell. This was the old turtle's special skill, the golden bell protection. At this moment, his whole body seemed to be wearing a layer of golden armor. Seeing such a scene, Lin Yuan just narrowed his eyes, and his movements were faster and more urgent. However, what he didn't expect was that at this moment, both the old turtle and the stone tablet on his body actually cracked. When Lin Yuan saw this scene, he was slightly stunned. He didn't expect such a change at this moment. His face turned pale as he looked at the tortoise. "I didn't think that the stone tablet would be broken in the end. Earlier, he was clearly just bluffing. Once he left this stone tablet, he wouldn't be able to use any of his techniques." The scene in front of him made him turn his head slightly. "All right, since you broke my equipment, I don't need to maintain this appearance anymore." After saying that, a red hair flashed on the stone tablet, and something floated in the water. Lin Yuan looked up and found that it was a skull made of white bones. He knew that it should belong to the demon god, but he didn't understand why it would appear at this time. Because in his opinion, shouldn't this thing be sealed in the old turtle's body? Why would it appear directly in this stone tablet? Lin Yuan frowned. "No matter what, I can't be too careless. If I really destroy the demon god's head at this time, I'm afraid that everything will be in vain. All my previous plans will also come to an end here." Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew that this matter definitely wouldn't end so easily. However, the big turtle in front of him had now turned into a person. He was now holding a harpoon in his left hand and a shield in his right. And this shield was his turtle shell. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. He could see that this guy in front of him was going to fight to the death with him. However, the old tortoise's movements were far faster than he had imagined. At this moment, the old tortoise seemed to be even faster than when he was in the water. He stomped on the ground fiercely, causing the soft sand on the ground to explode. Then, the harpoon in his hand also stabbed towards Lin Yuan's body. Lin Yuan fiercely swung the sword in his hand. His sword just happened to touch the harpoon, and at this moment, the turtle shell shield in the old turtle's hand also began to spin rapidly in an instant. One blade after another spun out from below. Seeing this scene, Little Iron Egg, who was next to him, almost couldn't help but exclaim, "Master, be careful." But before he could finish his words, Lin Yuan had already punched the tortoise shell fiercely, and the tortoise shell shattered with a loud sound. Almost in an instant, it had already turned into fragments on the ground. When they saw this scene, the people around them couldn't believe their eyes. Instead of calling it a human, it was better to call it an aquatic creature. They simply couldn't believe that this big turtle, who had always been known to be invincible in front of them, would end up like this. Lin Yuan didn't say anything. Instead, he sighed softly. I didn't want to kill you directly, but you were the one who recklessly came to me. However, what he didn't expect was that this guy actually began to devour his turtle shell bit by bit, as if to replenish some kind of power in his body. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He didn't expect this guy to be so crazy in the past. He didn't give up even in this state. However, he discovered another scene. Because not far away, the demon god's skull floating in the water seemed to be sending waves of energy to the old tortoise. Lin Yuan finally knew where the problem was. It was the demon god's skull floating in the water. Without any hesitation, he rushed forward. Seeing this scene, the demon god's skull just floated gently, and then the surrounding aquatic creatures rushed towards Lin Yuan as if they didn't care about their lives. When Little Iron Egg saw this scene, he couldn't bear it anymore. He clenched his fist and rushed over, ready to fight with these guys. However, Lin Yuan waved his hand and stretched out a hand. A colorful light instantly wrapped around his arm. At this moment, he seemed to be the absolute king of this underwater world, directly controlling everything. Chapter 1259. Lin Yuan's action caught the other guys off guard. At this moment, they felt that the world in the water that they relied on for survival had come to a standstill. It was as if this world didn't exist at all. Lin Yuan wasn't affected at all. Instead, he walked forward step by step. Seeing this, Lin Yuan seemed to have forgotten everything. He walked forward step by step and even threw the sword to Little Iron Egg. With every step he took, the bodies of the surrounding marine creatures began to crack to different degrees. Blood had already dyed the sea here red. The old turtle tried to move, but his body was too weak. He couldn't move at all. Under such circumstances, he could only stare blankly at Lin Yuan. I thought this so-called deity warden's head would have some other means to broaden my horizons, but now it seems that it's nothing much. This wasn't a provocation. It was like a superior looking down on a subordinate. In this situation, no one dared to say a word because they could feel that the guy standing in front of them was like a master of absolute power. They had no chance of surviving under his hands. Every step Lin Yuan took could kill a marine creature directly. This was his method. Whether it was cultivation or strength, he was many times stronger than these guys in front of him. Therefore, at this moment, every step he took could affect these guys around him. Seeing this change, the old turtle sighed softly as if he had finally given up resisting. In that case, I won't resist anymore. I only ask that you let them live. So no matter what you want to do to me, I will cooperate with you. After saying this, Lin Yuan nodded in satisfaction. However, he didn't stop. He still took a step forward. He didn't stop until all the water channels close to the old turtle exploded. If you had said so earlier, you wouldn't have wasted so much effort, Lin Yuan said as if he had just swatted a fly. Then, he turned to look at Little Iron Egg. He even waved his hand at him. Come. Little Iron Egg didn't know what to do. He walked over with the sword in his hand. Lin Yuan then pointed to the aquatic creatures next to him and said, Kill them all for me. Not only did the turtle not react, but even Little Iron Egg didn't understand what was going on. What the hell is going on? Master, what do you mean? How come I don't understand? Lin Yuan just shook his head gently. You don't need to understand. You just need to do as I say. These guys dared to make a move against us. Death is their only fate. Lin Yuan's voice was cold and emotionless after he finished speaking. However, what he wanted was absolute control of this place. The fact that the vast ancient path had appeared in this place meant that there was something lacking about this place. If these fellows left, they would only cause trouble for Little Bruiser in the future. When he thought of this, Lin Yuan did not hesitate and immediately thought of this fate. However, when the old turtle saw this scene, he couldn't hold back anymore. He directly knelt in front of Lin Yuan. I beg you, as long as you let them go, None of us will stop you from taking a step forward. Lin Yuan shook his head. Kneeling under such conditions is meaningless to me. So what if you kneel? You won't be able to move me. When Lin Yuan finished speaking, he glared at Little Iron Egg fiercely. Why aren't you going? What are you waiting for? Now, all the aquatic creatures were controlled by his absolute power. They were frightened, and no one dared to have any thoughts of resistance. After Lin Yuan finished speaking, Little Iron Egg finally picked up his sword and walked forward. He knew that this was a very important test for him. Therefore, at this moment, he decided to follow his master's orders. But as soon as he took the step, he realized that something was wrong. Because at this moment, when all of Lin Yuan's movements and actions had just appeared, the old tortoise was already ready to make a move. He wanted to rely on the strength of his two demon kings to self-destruct. Little Iron Egg didn't have much time to care about other things. He directly turned around and slashed his sword. He directly stabbed towards the old turtle. Lin Yuan stretched out a finger and pointed directly at the tip of the sword. I'll keep this guy for myself. You deal with the others. After saying this, one of his hands was ready to slap down. At this moment he finally spoke. I'll use the specific location of the other demon gods in exchange for a chance to live. What do you think? The old turtle finally said something that interested him. Lin Yuan looked at this guy with a smile. Then how can I be sure that what you said is true? You won't lie to me. When he said this, there was no other reaction. At this moment, he had already integrated all his thoughts into his actions. He grabbed the old tortoise by the neck. At this moment, the turtle shook his head gently. It's meaningless for me to lie to you now. Besides, you can also take my clansmen to the next level. Lin Yuan directly threw the old turtle to the ground. The moment the stone tablet was destroyed, the surrounding seawater had already evaporated. I don't think you have the guts to lie to me again. I'll spare your clansmen's lives. When he said this, Iron Egg finally breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan smiled slightly. He finally knew what he wanted to know. Finally, he looked at the old turtle. It's not impossible to lose their lives, but now, you have to show me the way to the next level. Right now, he had no way of distinguishing where the entrance to the next level was hidden in this world that was already filled with seawater. And he was too lazy to think about it anymore. He just asked the old turtle to help him find the place and location. Hearing this, the old turtle sighed softly. Then he stretched out his hand and pointed. Then, as soon as he appeared, he directly appeared in front of them. This is the passage to the next level. However, to enter the passage, you need to have a strong physical body. Otherwise, you won't be able to pass through here. Chapter 1260. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly when he heard that. This was because he could sense that even though he had obtained the God Fiend's head this time, he still needed to use some sort of method. That's right, but I'm afraid that I'll need some special methods to do what I need to do next, because what the old turtle said wasn't a lie. He could clearly feel the appearance of the vortex. The pressure was so great that he couldn't even react in time. However, right at that moment, the tortoise's gaze suddenly landed on Bruiser. He seemed to want to say something but stopped himself. However, I'm afraid this little brother won't be able to enter from here. His physical body isn't strong enough. He didn't say what he wanted to say. There was no need for him to say it. Everyone understood the meaning behind his words. Earlier, he had said that he needed a strong fleshly body, so he didn't want to let Little Iron Egg go in. Lin Yuan also turned his gaze and looked at Little Iron Egg next to him. Do you want to go in? This was an extremely simple action, but it stirred up endless waves in Little Iron Egg's heart. This was because he knew that if he wanted to go in, his master would let him in no matter what method he came up with. He had some doubts because he knew that he was too weak. Moreover, the old turtle should be able to tell that his current state wasn't enough to directly rush in. He gently nodded, then shook his head. Although I want to go in with my current strength, I'm afraid it will be very difficult for me to display my strength in there, and I'm afraid I might not even be able to protect my own life. Lin Yuan frowned. I'm only asking if you want to go in, not if you can protect your own life. After saying that, Little Iron Egg's face was filled with joy. He immediately became excited. Master, Are you saying that I have a way to go in from here? He had benefited greatly from this trip. Just by watching his master fight, he already felt that he had benefited immensely. Under such circumstances, how could he not want to take another step forward and continue to break through? Lin Yuan chuckled when he saw Little Iron Egg's expression. Of course, as long as you can freely use your own cultivation method. The killing will incantation he had given to Little Bruiser could allow him to use blood-dripping dash, and even reach a certain level of the undying bending body. However, a restriction like that wasn't enough to keep the little guy in check. He also knew that the little guy had such a reaction because he was worried that he would become a country bumpkin. That was why this guy spoke like that. However, when he saw this change, Lin Yuan sighed softly. From today onwards, you must remember that no matter what, you must come here with absolute confidence and caution. You must come here with the attitude of an expert. From now on, I will confer you the title of God. At that time, you will be in control of this situation. If you can't complete the task I give you, don't call yourself my disciple anymore. This was the last time Lin Yuan told Little Iron Tower. This was also the last time he could comfort his fragile confidence. After all, he did not need weaklings, whether in terms of mentality or strength. Hearing this, Little Iron Egg's expression suddenly turned solemn. He nodded his head. Of course, he knew that his master wouldn't lie under such circumstances. However, when he fully circulated the killing will incantation, he felt that he couldn't resist the power of the whirlpool. His entire body was rooted to the spot. He didn't know what to do. However, Little Iron Egg's helplessness didn't allow Lin Yuan to comfort him again. Lin Yuan didn't even look at him. Lin Yuan's actions were to tell Little Iron Egg that he had to face the situation by himself no matter what. No one else could help him. Under such circumstances, no one could help him. Lin Yuan didn't say anything when he saw this change. Instead, he sat quietly at the side. He knew that Little Iron Egg still needed some time. A normal old man would also sit cross-legged on the ground. Although Little Iron Egg had transformed into his human form, there was still a faint turtle shell on his back. Seeing this, Lin Yuan smiled gently. He knew that the old turtle wasn't very confident, so he directly went up to the next floor. He was sure that the old turtle didn't know what would happen up there, so at this moment, the old turtle was condensing his strength. Lin Yuan waited quietly. If Little Iron Egg didn't have absolute confidence, he knew that there would definitely be some special problems. When he thought of this, he no longer hesitated. Or rather, it was useless to hesitate now. At this moment, all his thoughts were on himself. He was thinking about another matter. When he obtained the 2 organs, he also left the demon god's armor and weapon behind. However, these were only the essence of the armor and weapon. These were 2 special gems. They were the same as what he saw in the stomach of the sea monster. However, he was now thinking about another matter. How could he gather all these things? What would happen after that? He didn't believe that the demon god would let others take away his organs so easily. Since Little Iron Egg had already cultivated to the point where he could live with his own organs, he must have extraordinary strength. Even if he was just a second medicine king, he must have some strength. While he was thinking about this matter, Little Iron Egg suddenly stood up. His body was covered with blood mist. At this moment, he looked like a real Azura, standing there with awe-inspiring killing intent. When you saw this scene, Lin Yuan knew that Little Iron Egg's current physical condition had become a special state. As long as he could complete the next step of his plan, his cultivation method would be considered a great success. At that time, no matter what kind of opportunity there was, Little Iron Egg would grab it in his hands. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He could feel that at this moment, no matter what, there was no way to stop him from moving forward. On the side, Little Iron Egg narrowed his eyes and glanced at Little Iron Egg. He didn't say a word. Chapter 1261. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and looked at them. The 2 of them said, "Since you're all ready, let's leave now." He was ready, but at this moment, the old turtle said, "Wait a minute, I still have some things to take away. Since I'm already a rebel, I might as well call for a more thorough appeal here. As long as this session is destroyed, the ones below won't be able to maintain. After saying this, he began to move. Seeing that this guy began to find all kinds of strange things in this session, Lin Yuan finally understood that there was another formation hidden here. Even if someone destroyed this place, it wouldn't take long for this place to be restored to its original state. This was an extremely powerful formation. If it was someone with an ordinary cultivation base, they wouldn't be able to do this at all. Lin Yuan could naturally see that this old turtle didn't leave any way out. He must have made up his mind to leave with him. Moreover, in this state, he was also considering what would happen if he really entered the next floor. At this moment, the old turtle narrowed his eyes slightly. Someone from above sent something down to deal with me. As soon as he said this, thunderclouds rolled in the sky of this session. Lin Yuan frowned and looked at the sky. He could see that there seemed to be something accumulating power in the sky. And the center of these thunderclouds was the vortex. When he saw this scene, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. I think they don't want us to enter the next floor, but the more they do this, the more curious I am. After saying this, he took a step forward. At this moment, he almost didn't have any special thoughts. He just wanted to enter the next floor. However, since the other party could make such preparations, they must have made some other arrangements. Lin Yuan took the first step forward. As expected, the moment he was about to step into the vortex, all the thunderclouds suddenly released thunderbolts at the same time and surged towards him. These bolts of lightning were like spiritual snakes, almost swallowing it whole. Lin Yuan just narrowed his eyes. He directly used his body to withstand these thunderbolts. Immediately, all the thunderbolts seemed to have no effect at this moment. Or rather, the moment they came into contact with his body, the light of these thunderbolts was directly absorbed. Whether it was Lin Yuan or some other people, they could clearly see the scene that appeared in front of them at this moment. Without the slightest hesitation, the old turtle stepped forward and said, "Mister, you're really something. You're actually able to withstand the lightning. You should know that this is the technique of a 5 lightning celestial immortal." 5 thunders celestial? Lin Yuan frowned slightly. He had never heard of this name before. Little Iron Egg, on the other hand, trembled involuntarily when he heard it. Are you talking about the ancient evil god, 5 Thunder Celestial Immortal? He had heard of this name before because there was a legend about this 5 Thunder Celestial Immortal in their family and even in the general knowledge. This guy was said to be both good and evil. At this time, his strength was unpredictable and unfathomable. Everyone who heard his name involuntarily took a step back. At this moment, Lin Yuan just smiled slightly when he heard this name. I'd like to see how powerful this so-called ancient evil god, the so-called celestial immortal, is. After saying this, he took a step forward without any hesitation. He even released a 7-colored light in front of him. He wanted to see how much difference there was between his strength and this so-called 5 Thunder Celestial Immortals. Of course, this guy was stronger than him. At this moment, Little Iron Egg seemed to be unable to control his emotions. He stepped forward and said, "Supreme Being, let me have a try. I don't think this is called strength. Moreover, I feel that my cultivation method has reached a threshold and needs an opportunity to break through. Why don't you give this opportunity to me?" After he finished speaking, he ignored Lin Yuan and the old tortoise next to him and walked out directly. Seeing such a scene, almost everyone was stunned for a moment. At this moment, Lin Yuan just took a few steps back. Looking at Little Iron Egg rushing up directly, he finally felt a little satisfied in his heart. It seemed that his previous words were not in vain. This little guy finally reacted. The fact that he was able to rush forward in one step meant that this kid had already made up his mind and had some confidence in himself. In this state, no matter what this kid did now, he wouldn't be surprised. At this moment, Lin Yuan's every move seemed to have a profound meaning. Although he allowed Little Iron Egg to rush forward, he had to leave some experts behind to prevent any accidents from happening to Little Iron Egg. However, at this moment, the thunderbolts seemed to be angered. They looked at Little Iron Egg as if they could no longer control their emotions. This was a baptism of thunderbolts. It was as if the thunderbolts began to spread all over his body and didn't stop at all. Lin Yuan had been watching all this. He knew that this kid was far from reaching his limit, but the old turtle was indeed a little worried about the current situation. This was because cracks had begun to appear on Little Iron Egg's body. These cracks didn't show any signs at first, but as more and more cracks appeared, the blood on his body began to form a special mist around him. The more it was like this, the more powerful the thunderbolts became. Little Iron Egg didn't know what to say when he saw this scene. Everyone could see that he was just barely holding on. At this moment, all of his movements, even the slightest movement, would trigger the thunderbolts. There was no room for him to move at all. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He could clearly see what was happening in front of him. It wasn't like what he had imagined at all. He could even feel that this attack wasn't very pleasant. Little Iron Egg's strength couldn't be stopped at all. If he didn't take action now, Little Iron Egg might die here. Just as he was about to make a move, Little Bruiser let out a roar. "Hey, Little Bruiser!" Chapter 1262. A roar shook the surroundings. At this moment, Little Iron didn't give his opponent any chance to retreat. He directly ran up and began to suppress the thunder. At the same time, the Tianwu Shu Ras in his body appeared beside him. They seemed to be gathering power to help Little Iron Egg fight against the thunder. Little Iron Egg was covered in blood, but he didn't step back. Step by step, he stood in the middle of the vortex. At this moment, he suddenly turned his head. "Master, am I qualified to be your disciple?" After finishing the sentence, there was a sudden change in Lin Yuan's face. He could feel that Little Iron Egg seemed to have unleashed all his power at this moment. At this moment, Little Iron Egg took a step forward fearlessly. It was obvious that Little Iron Egg was no longer the little guy who could only lean on him. This change shocked the old tortoise beside him. He didn't expect that this little guy could unleash such a powerful force at this moment. At this moment, he even felt that everything was making him feel small. The strength of this little guy in front of him completely surpassed his. At this moment, even he didn't dare to stand in the middle of the thunder in such a wild manner. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled. Then, he glanced at the guy next to him and said, "It seems that things have come to this point. Then, we have a chance to deal with this guy in front of us." After saying this, he didn't hesitate at all and directly rushed towards the guy in front of him. He could clearly see that Little Iron Egg was actually helping him resist the most powerful thunder in the vortex in front of him. "Good boy, I didn't misjudge you. If you continue to maintain this enthusiasm for battle, I have a hunch that when we go to the next level, we will definitely encounter difficult battles. At that time, you will be able to play your role." After saying this, Lin Yuan didn't look at the old turtle behind him anymore. He stepped into the vortex. Little Iron Egg seemed to have received approval at this moment. He directly nodded. At this time, the old turtle directly followed. He knew that in his current state, there was no way he could resist the lightning that appeared. If they really walked in, they would probably be attacked by the so-called Five Thunder Celestial Immortal. He didn't want to lose his life at this moment, so he directly prepared to close the vortex at the last moment. At that time, he could escape. He didn't want to lose his life for two strangers. However, at this moment, Lin Yuan's movements changed. Just as this guy was about to leave, a hand suddenly grabbed him by the neck and pulled him in. "Things have already come to this point. Do you think you can just walk away?" Lin Yuan's voice was a bit crisp. At this moment, he didn't have any other thoughts. He just wanted to solve the matter in front of him. When he found that the guy behind him had other thoughts and actions, he didn't want to let him live at all. Because he could feel that this guy's thoughts were too strange, and his temperament was also unstable. Who knew when such a person would become a traitor? If that happened, it would be difficult to clean up the mess if he really caused some trouble. After all, he wanted to build a city for himself in this wasteland. Although he might not be completely honest, at least it would make everything look better and leave him a way out. Of course, this was also another way to expand his territory. However, he didn't expect the old turtle to have the intention to rebel from the very beginning. Little Iron Egg snorted coldly. Just as he was about to kill him, he realized that the scene around him had changed. It was a patch of dusky yellow land. The land was full of sand dunes. Beyond the sand dunes was the endless sky. Above the sky, there were layers of twinkling stars. Lin Yuan looked at this scene and knew that the secret of this layer was probably hidden in these stars, but he did not know what the other party was thinking, nor did he know what the other party wanted to do, nor did he know where the other body of the demon god was hidden. Seeing that little iron egg was about to attack the old turtle, he directly reached out and stopped him. Don't attack him first. He's the only one who knows the whereabouts of the demon god's body. I want to restore the demon god. After he said this, little iron egg snorted coldly and finally let go of his hand. He turned to look to the side. Seeing this, Lin Yuan looked at the old turtle and said softly, "You see, if we want to, we can take your life anytime and anywhere. So you'd better cooperate with us. Otherwise, I don't know what my disciple will do." After he finished speaking, he couldn't be bothered to say anything else. And at this moment, the old tortoise finally nodded. At this moment, his face was ashen. At this moment, he didn't have any other ideas. He knew that the man in front of him would definitely do what he said. The little guy next to him was already like a wild beast. If the man really gave the order, the little guy would probably tear him to pieces without hesitation. Thinking of this, the old turtle finally nodded in a hurry. "I promise I won't be disloyal again. However, the scattered star world isn't that easy to break into because this place is completely different from my place. There are 3 demon kings gathered here." After he finished speaking, Lin Yuan's interest was immediately piqued. It was very rare for him to encounter 3 demon kings above the demon king realm. At this moment, if he could meet such a guy here, he would naturally take him under his wing without hesitation. Little Iron Egg seemed to have suddenly realized something, or smelled something special. "Master, there seems to be something hidden here that is watching us. Do you want me to pull them out now?" After saying this, Little Iron Egg was ready to attack without any hesitation. However, Lin Yuan still shook his head. "Don't waste your energy. Let him go." After saying this, he directly pointed at the old turtle. Hearing this, the old turtle's face immediately turned pale. Chapter 1263. Having lived in this inverted tower for a long time, he naturally knew what kind of things were hiding here. He also knew clearly what the consequences would be if he fought with the other party here. However, he quickly looked at Lin Yuan in front of him and hurriedly spoke. "Mister, these things are not something that I can fight against. They are all demon kings here. However, they are under the control of the 3 demon kings and obey their orders. I am no match for them." Lin Yuan frowned. He didn't expect this guy to be so arrogant. He actually used these monster kings as servants. However, he immediately checked the surrounding desert. He was sure that these so-called monster kings were hiding here. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and said to the people around him, "If I'm not wrong, your strength shouldn't be enough to fight against me. Why don't you show yourselves and let's have a talk?" However, as soon as he finished speaking, a scorching force suddenly flowed back and forth in the desert. At this moment, Lin Yuan could also clearly see that above the stars in the sky, there was a little starlight falling, which happened to shine on the monster king who had just attacked. Only then did he realize that the monster king in front of him was actually a desert scorpion. Such a scorpion hiding in the desert could actually become a monster king. This surprised everyone. However, the old turtle's expression quickly changed. "This guy is too strong. If we really deal with him using this method, I'm afraid we won't have a good ending in the end." After saying this, Lin Yuan suddenly narrowed his eyes and looked in front of him. There was something special in front of him. It was a few tricks that Little Iron Egg had left behind in the lightning. He rubbed his hands together. It was just a simple movement, but there was a trace of blood on his hands. This was his threat, but it was also his method. The old turtle's panic formed a sharp contrast with Little Iron Egg's performance. Lin Yuan didn't care about the two anymore. Instead, he stepped directly in front of the huge scorpion. He didn't even care that the scorpion's pair of huge pincers were already waving at him. Little Iron Egg didn't hesitate. Just as the opponent was about to attack, the blood-red lightning in his hand flew out. There was no sound at all. After a series of crackling sounds, Scorpion, who seemed to have been tortured terribly, fell limp to the ground. However, it was still trying its best to raise its pincers, as if it wanted to continue attacking. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. Looks like you still haven't given up. When he finished speaking, Little Iron Egg was ready to launch another attack. However, Lin Yuan stomped his foot at this time. The next moment, all the demon kings revealed their figures on the ground around them. Their strength was not enough to reach the demon king realm. What truly allowed them to possess such strength was the starlight that shot down from the sky. He knew that the scene in front of him was not the true strength of these fellows. Little Bruiser had truly raised his killing intent tactics. At this moment, his attack was naturally unstoppable by these fellows. He stomped his foot to shake all these things out. At least, he couldn't let them continue to hide like this. Little Iron Egg snorted coldly. "Master, do you want me to kill them now?" After he finished speaking, the fellows at the side all frowned coldly. They didn't believe that this little brat in front of them could deal with them. They even felt that they could eat this little brat at any time. However, it was obvious that they had misjudged Little Iron Egg's strength. At this moment, everything seemed to have gone up in smoke. Lin Yuan's actions seemed to be telling everyone that although he was strong, his little disciple was no pushover. It was also at this moment that Little Iron Egg finally began his killing journey. He couldn't help but launch his own attack, and the movements and methods of this attack were a little shaky at first, but slowly he began to become skilled. He was indeed a natural Azura. The strength that he displayed at this moment was not something that others could imagine. Lin Yuan didn't use any of his methods. He seemed to be helping Little Iron Egg determine his target. When the old turtle saw this, he naturally knew that these small fries were no match for him. However, he was happy to be idle now, so he watched the show from the side. As soon as Lin Yuan's action appeared, the other guys had already attacked Little Iron Egg. Lin Yuan didn't pay attention to it. Instead, he quietly glanced at everything around him. Then, the old turtle actually saw through the intentions of these guys at this moment, and then threw out his turtle shell. This time, it happened to block Little Iron Egg's back. It protected her from a special Demon King's sneak attack. At the same time, the other Demon Kings all turned to the old turtle. "You old bastard, you actually betrayed us and helped an outsider. Do you know how powerful that demon god is? Your actions alone are enough for him to suppress you and make you unable to reincarnate forever." Lin Yuan coldly snorted. At this moment, Little Iron Egg also spoke. "Then aren't you afraid that my master will suppress you and make you unable to reincarnate forever?" Little Iron Egg's voice seemed to come from the depths of hell. It was also at this moment that he sent out all of his attacks. Streaks of red lightning began to drill out of his body. At this moment, his eyes were bloodshot as he approached the guys in front of him step by step. The demon kings around him had already begun to retreat. The sky martial Azuras around him involuntarily revealed themselves, as if they didn't want to hide at all. The moment this happened, Lin Yuan smiled. He knew that from today onwards, Little Iron Egg had grown. This guy would definitely become a big confidant of his. With this kind of strength and a natural Azura, no matter what method he used, he would definitely be able to stimulate his bloodthirst. When that time came, he would be able to directly attack the 3 Demon King Realm fellows once his strength improved by another step. Lin Yuan's expression was somewhat hesitant. He could clearly see the special changes in front of him. Chapter 1264. Although he didn't want his disciple to be a weakling, he didn't want his disciple to become a person who had lost his conscience because of killing. He was testing whether Little Bruiser could suppress the desire to kill in his heart. Therefore, he didn't do anything else. Although he had kicked out all the demon monarchs, he wanted to test Little Bruiser's temperament. At this moment, no one would be able to stop Little Bruiser's actions. Little Bruiser was getting more and more excited as he killed. He began to find his targets and threw himself at them one by one. Blood had already dyed his whole body red. However, not only did Little Bruiser not stop, but his body seemed to have stopped for a moment. Lin Yuan shook his head when he saw the changes in front of him. The old turtle looked at him in surprise. He didn't know what was going on. It was also at this moment that a special existence suddenly appeared one after another. At this moment, almost everyone could clearly see that the one who appeared in front of them was not a child, but a killing god. Lin Yuan also narrowed his eyes slightly. He knew that as long as one practiced this kind of martial arts, it was easy to be immersed in the pleasure of killing. Moreover, this kid was a natural Azura, so at this moment he couldn't stop it no matter what. Because once this kind of human intervention was stopped, this kid would probably not have any promotion in his life. He could only rely on his physical strength to barely survive. However, this wasn't the result he wanted. He wanted to build a city here, a city where Little Bruiser was a god. However, as the screams continued, the low-level monsters began to fall into a disadvantageous position. They began to flee. They weren't a match for Bruiser at all. How could they not run? Seeing this scene, the old turtle asked, "Why do you have to let him carry out such a massacre? Such a massacre is meaningless." Lin Yuan just turned his head and glared at him. "Do I need you to teach me what to do?" After he finished his words, the old turtle immediately shut his mouth. He knew that he couldn't afford to offend the man in front of him. He also knew that if something really went wrong at this moment, he might not be able to solve it. Thinking of this, the old turtle didn't dare to do anything else. He just wanted to wait there obediently. After all, he couldn't understand these things, let alone stop them. However, he didn't feel good looking at the dead monster kings. After all, these were all his former comrades. But now they had all lost their lives. Lin Yuan just looked at it gently. He didn't care what the old turtle was thinking at all. He didn't even look at the old turtle's appearance. At this moment, Little Iron Egg seemed to have finally woken up. He quickly stopped his movements and began to pant heavily. His entire body seemed to have fallen into a special state, and at this moment he finally recovered. Although his eyes were bloodshot and his hands were still trembling, he still turned his head to look at Lin Yuan. "Master, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel like I can't control myself at all? It's as if there's a fire burning in my chest. I want to kill everything in the world." After he said this, his hands trembled even more violently. It was as if he wanted to erupt with all his power at this moment. He wanted to directly launch all his attacks at this moment. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan just shook his head gently. This is the side effect of your cultivation method. If you can't withstand this change, no matter how I teach you, you won't be able to advance at all. After saying this, he didn't hesitate at all and directly said to the guy in front of him, "Look around you. Everyone died because of you. Do you feel guilty because of these people?" Lin Yuan's move was a test to see how much his mood had recovered. Little Iron Egg decisively shook his head. "No, I just feel more excited, especially when I see blood." At this moment, the sky martial Azuras around him slowly reappeared. At this moment, their eyes were also bloodshot, as if they had been stimulated by the blood and exploded with monstrous killing intent. Lin Yuan understood that with these sky martial Azuras around, no matter how Little Bruiser wanted to control them, he had to get their permission first. These guys were now filled with killing intent, so Little Bruiser simply couldn't control them with his own strength. Looking at the appearance of Little Iron Egg at this moment, who had become more and more dispirited and unable to control himself, Lin Yuan sighed suddenly. Although he thought that this kid had a high chance of becoming his confidant, he would not change his mind at this moment no matter how many people there were and how many things were going to influence him. If Little Bruiser couldn't withstand it, then he would have to give up. He would have to give up on this person who could only get lost in the slaughter. However, at this moment, Little Bruiser roared furiously. His arms trembled more and more violently. "No, I can't continue like this. I can't be controlled by killing." He seemed to have realized his problem. Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows slightly. He knew that Little Bruiser must have realized the crux of the problem. However, he didn't know what kind of power was supporting Little Bruiser. After all, ordinary people couldn't control their emotions. At this moment, it was as if he was controlling all of his strength at this moment. At the same time, he also gathered his willpower. Lin Yuan smiled gently. "You should know that killing intent is your weapon. You have to treat your weapon well. You can't be controlled by them. They should be controlled by you." After Lin Yuan said this, Little Bruiser's expression became somewhat fascinated. However, he immediately began to control his killing intent. Then, a blood-red spear suddenly appeared in his hand. Seeing such a scene happen, Lin Yuan suddenly smiled slightly. "It seems like you can control it now." Little Bruiser also smiled. However, he knew that this was only the beginning because his transformation wasn't complete yet. Chapter 1265. At that moment, a mass of blood energy began to condense around his body. Then, everything about him began to change. One after another, blood-red armor appeared on his body. Every piece was bright red, as if they should have appeared on his body in the first place. On the side, watching this scene, the old turtle suddenly realized why Lin Yuan didn't say a word just now and just quietly watched all this happen. He also understood what kind of person appeared in front of him at this moment. This was simply an evil spirit from hell. However, this evil spirit had his own consciousness and obeyed the orders of others. He really didn't know what to say about raising such a powerful person. He looked at Lin Yuan in shock. "You've basically raised a killing machine for you," said Lin Feng. "What's so bad about killing?" Lin Yuan turned to look at the old man. He understood better than anyone else when it was better to use slaughter to solve a problem than to use other methods. Not only did he understand this matter for the first day, but he also had the map that could confer godhood in his hands. The world was vast, and everything was about fighting over the offerings of mortals. Therefore, if he wanted to carve out a territory of his own, he had to turn everything here into his own territory. Or rather, he had to make everyone submit to him unconditionally. The vast ancient path was just the beginning for him. As for Little Iron Egg, he was the first god here that he looked down upon. The old turtle was still sighing, but Little Iron Egg had already taken a step forward. The monsters and demon kings in front of him didn't know what to say. They even felt themselves trembling involuntarily. Little Iron Egg suddenly turned to look at Lin Yuan. "Master, what should we do with them?" Lin Yuan turned his head and glanced at the old turtle on the side, then said lightly, "These minions have suffered heavy casualties. Why haven't I seen the Real boss come out yet?" When he heard this, the old turtle was a bit stunned. He didn't understand what the boss meant. "You're saying..." Before the old turtle could finish speaking, a cloud of dust rose up. At this moment, there was a burst of smoke and dust in the sand, and then Lin Yuan saw an extremely vague figure appear in front of him. It wasn't a demon king who looked extremely strong. It was a guy wearing a black robe with a red lotus embroidered on it. This guy covered his face with black gauze and held a knife in his hand. When he saw this guy, the old turtle's expression suddenly changed. He knew he wasn't a match for this guy, and he knew that this guy was the absolute king of this place. This was the demon king of the desert. He was the ruler of all the demon kings in the desert. He must be the mastermind you were talking about. Lin Yuan looked at the guy in front of him. He could feel that this guy was like an unsheathed sword, showing off its sharpness. Little Iron Egg's eyes were burning with the desire to fight. The moment this guy appeared, he wanted to rush out. But Lin Yuan, who was on the side, stopped him. "Do you know the whereabouts of the demon god's body?" After he finished speaking, the black-clothed man next to him coldly snorted. "Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. If that thing is released, what awaits the human world will be a catastrophe. I absolutely won't allow that to happen." But after he said this, Lin Yuan burst out laughing. "I thought you had a good excuse. I didn't expect it to be such a lousy one." Naturally, he looked down on the guy in front of him. In his opinion, this guy could have openly stated his purpose long ago, but he didn't. He only talked about how selfless he was. "Then don't tell me you're doing this for the human race. Otherwise, why do you have to control this place? Why don't you just destroy this demon god?" Lin Yuan didn't want to expose this guy, but after seeing how this guy was so arrogant, he finally couldn't help it. In this place, anyone could tell that they were ordered by some big shot to stay here and guard the demon god's body. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to live aimlessly in this situation. At this moment, he could feel that this guy in front of him actually found such a grand reason to say that he was doing this for the human race. As soon as Lin Yuan finished speaking, the guy pulled out his knife. At this moment, he knew that it was useless to talk nonsense, so he was ready to fight. Seeing this, before Lin Yuan could move, Little Iron Egg had already rushed up. The weapon condensed from killing intent directly collided with the guy. But before the weapons collided, Lin Yuan had already stepped between the two of them and then gently shook his hand. The weapons of the two people instantly separated. Lin Yuan sneered, "He's just my disciple. Aren't you disgracing your own reputation by bullying him like this? Since you said you're doing this for the human race, then let's have a good fight." After saying this, he no longer had any reservations in his heart. At this moment, he just wanted to directly defeat this guy in front of him. At this moment, a few stone pillars suddenly protruded from the sand dune. The four limbs and the torso of the demon god were fixed on these stone pillars. Seeing this, Lin Yuan immediately laughed softly. The man in black was shocked. He didn't expect the torso and limbs of the demon god to appear so openly at this moment. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. "Look, this demon god also hopes that he can reappear in this world." Seeing this, the man in black's face suddenly turned cold. Without hesitation, he pulled out his knife and rushed towards Lin Yuan. "If you want to reawaken this demon god, you'll have to step over my dead body." After saying this, his knife turned into a black light and directly slashed towards Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan immediately took a step forward and rushed towards the knife light. Lin Yuan's actions seemed to be deliberately provoking him. At this moment, when the guy saw this scene, his face suddenly changed. He felt that after his knife slashed out, it seemed to be stuck in the void. Chapter 1266. He couldn't make any other movements. At this moment, he felt as if everything had turned cold. Lin Yuan's actions made him unable to imagine what was going on. However, at this moment, Lin Yuan's figure suddenly split into 5. The 5 Lin Yuans rushed to the side and ran to the bottom of each stone pillar. At this moment, several Lin Yuans began to charge. The stone pillars suddenly burst open, and at this moment, it began to burn with raging flames. Then, the black-clothed man threw his sabers into the air. "Looks like you're determined to get the demon god's body. Then don't blame me for going all out against you." When he finished speaking, he had already leaped high into the air. The 5 blades that were hovering in the air were like meteors as they ruthlessly smashed towards the stone pillar. Lin Yuan's 5 figures roared directly toward the sky, and then a scorching flame sprayed from their mouths. There was no other movement. It was just a pure head-on collision. Seeing this change, the black-clothed man didn't retreat at all. He waved his hand and his strength became more and more violent. It was a pure collision of strength. At this moment he finally woke up. The black-clothed man said loudly, "No matter what your purpose is, we have to fight to the death. Don't think that you'll be safe just because you have this special 3 true fire." His 5 sabers turned into 5 streaks of black light and drilled into the stone pillar. Then, a monstrous power erupted from the stone pillar and rose into the sky. At this moment, almost everything had exploded. The black light that blotted out the sky began to spread throughout the space. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he reappeared in the center of the battlefield. There was only one. Little Iron Egg still wanted to rush forward, but Lin Yuan had already seen that he was not Little Iron Egg's opponent at all, so he pulled out his hand and accepted the battle immediately. However, he didn't expect that this guy would still protect the 5 demon gods' bodies at the last moment. Everything about him seemed to have been verified at this moment. Lin Yuan raised his head slightly and said to the man in black, "Using your own body as the price and your life as the sacrifice, you still want to protect the bodies of the 5 demonic gods. Who on earth is threatening you?" After he finished speaking, there was almost no trace of hesitation. Murderous intent rose. Lin Yuan's expression suddenly turned cold. He originally wanted to give the young man with the black saber a chance. As long as the other party was willing to admit defeat at this critical moment, as long as he had the slightest intention of admitting defeat, he would spare the other party's life. However, not only did this fellow refuse to give in, he even wanted to fight to the death with him. The rainbow-colored light in Lin Yuan's hand began to slowly gather with the black smoke in the sky. Or rather, It was the entanglement of two forces. At this moment, Lin Yuan didn't seem to have any hesitation in his actions. He flicked his finger lightly toward the sky, and then the countless seven-colored lights began to transform into several seven-colored divine dragons. They began to devour the black light unknowingly. It was also at this moment that countless chains began to grow from the ground and directly entwined in the air. The man in black shouted, "Good, good, good. I want to see what kind of power you have to resurrect this demon god." After he finished speaking, he soared into the sky almost without any hesitation. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan said directly, "Since you must make sure that this demon god never appears, I can only kill you." After he finished speaking, the sky, which was originally gloomy, instantly became clear. He didn't need to look at anything else. He knew that the guy in front of him had no chance. Those seven-colored divine dragons had already devoured the dark clouds. At this moment, the countless chains had already wrapped around the rainbow divine dragon's body. This was the means of this demon god, and also the stubbornness of this demon god. Lin Yuan's expression began to change. He naturally knew that all this was done to get the demon god. However, he was looking forward to seeing how strong this guy was. Demon god. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly, and he directly took a step forward. Then, all the chains were gently touched by his fingers at this moment, and they all shattered. At this moment, Lin Yuan directly took out the demon god's head and heart in his hand. He knew that as long as he gathered these things, the legendary demon god would be resurrected. However, he didn't expect that at this moment, when he took action, not only had the demon god recovered all its power, but it had even absorbed the rainbow divine dragon that it had released in the sky. Devour? Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He already had some other thoughts in his mind. At this moment, he didn't want any more accidents to happen. He also knew that at this moment, no matter what he wanted to do, he had to endure it because he still didn't know what kind of strength this demon god had. The old turtle stood aside and began to tremble. This guy was trembling all over. He was simply afraid of this demon god in front of him. Although he didn't know which side was more powerful, he knew that no matter which side appeared in front of him, they would definitely have some hidden means. And at this moment, the guy's body began to slowly gather. The sky began to clear, and all the special scenes disappeared. All the desert turned into dust after the power on his body dissipated. Now, the demon god's body was condensing again. This meant that this guy's strength had begun to increase. This was the first time Lin Yuan felt such a majestic power, but it was interesting to think that there was such an existence in the vast ancient path. At this moment, all his attention was on the body of the demon god that had begun to slowly gather together in front of him. He wanted to see what kind of person was so powerful. Lin Yuan slowly watched the sand condense on this guy's body, and his skin and flesh appeared bit by bit. At this moment, the sand seemed to be endowed with some special energy and a special mission. Finally, when all the power in this world was gathered, this guy's true appearance was slowly revealed. I, King Chengkung, am finally alive again. Chapter 1267. Lin Yuan frowned. That was because he heard the other party mention the king of Chengkong. He must have been a king in the past. He watched as the king of Chengkong's body slowly grew taller, and his breathing was like thunder. He knew that the king of Chengkong was definitely a top existence in the world of the Black Pagoda. Human, you are the one who let me out. Chengkong's large eyes suddenly glanced at Lin Yuan. After he finished speaking, his eyes suddenly burst with a burst of vigor. In that case, this king can make you my follower. What? Lin Yuan suddenly laughed. He hadn't expected the king of Chengkong to be so arrogant. Becoming his follower? What kind of joke was that? Before he could say anything, little Iron Egg couldn't hold back anymore. The long spear in his hand shook violently. His power erupted instantly, and endless killing intent swept towards the king of Chengkong. At this moment, the so-called Chengkong king furrowed his brows and said, "There's actually a natural Azura." He laughed loudly. He reached out and grabbed little Iron Egg's long spear. Then he exerted a little force, and the blood-red long spear in his hand instantly turned into powder. However, as an Azura, you are still too weak. My old subordinates are all in your body. Come out." After he finished speaking, he slapped Little Iron Egg's body again. Then, the Tianwu Azuras who had already submitted to him appeared. These fellows weren't controlled by the killing intent like before. They all directly submitted to the demon god. "Welcome, my king." Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan smiled gently. Little Iron Egg dodged to the side. He knew that he wasn't strong enough to deal with the king of Chengkong in front of him. Therefore, he very consciously ran to the side. He knew very well that under such circumstances, only his master would be able to restrain this fellow before him. But before he could make a move, the guy who called himself the king of Chongkong pointed at Lin Yuan fiercely. "Submit or die." As soon as he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand to grab Lin Yuan. However, Lin Yuan just waved his hand gently, and then grabbed the guy's huge arm with his hand. A 7-colored light flashed. He cut off the arm of the Fiend Celestial. The Fiend Celestial clearly did not expect such a scene to happen. He did not even have time to react. "It seems like the rainbow divine dragons that entered my body were all you're doing." He looked at Lin Yuan curiously. Immediately, the rainbow-colored divine dragons surged out from his wrist and turned into his flesh and blood. "However, this power is real. It seems you do not intend to become this king's servant." Lin Yuan chuckled. "I awakened you in order to make you my servant. Now, I'm giving you a chance. Submit or die." The god fiend seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world. "I, the king of Chengkong, am a king. How can I submit to a mortal like you? You can die now." As soon as he finished speaking, he roared. Then, a huge axe appeared in his hand and he slashed at Lin Yuan. Seeing such a scene, Lin Yuan's expression was slightly smiling. He naturally knew that at this moment, this guy would not rest until he was dead. However, this was not his goal. He wanted this guy to become a necessary condition for everyone here to believe in Little Iron Egg. When he thought of this, he took a step forward without any hesitation. "Since you're not willing to submit, I'll beat you until you do." Suddenly, a golden bell fell down from the sky. This was another method of Lin Yuan's. A golden bell was directly attached to the god fiend's body. The so-called king of Chengkong could not escape at all. He could feel that this guy had actually started to gnaw on his golden bell. This guy's big mouth seemed to be able to swallow everything. Seeing such a change, Lin Yuan directly snorted coldly, and he fiercely slammed his palm toward the golden bell. With a loud bang, the so-called king of Chengkong covered his ears at this moment. Even his 7 orifices were bleeding. He screamed and the huge axe appeared in his hand again. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not break the golden bell. Lin Yuan punched again. Although there was no pleasure in punching flesh, the god fiend was trapped in the golden bell like a trapped beast. Seeing that he could not deal with the guy in front of him, the god fiend opened his bloody mouth and spat out all the Azuras that he had swallowed. He wanted to use these Azuras as a sacrifice to break the golden bell. Lin Yuan naturally saw through this guy's method. However, he just smiled faintly. Finally, he slapped the golden bell. All the Azuras had been scattered. Little Iron Egg, who was at the side, felt endless heartache. He knew that if these Azuras were used on him, there would be countless benefits. However, seeing that they had been smashed into pieces, he felt a little heartache. Because his master's decision would not be wrong. Little Iron Egg, there is no need to feel heartache. Since these guys can't submit to you, they will be awakened by the king of Chengkong at any time. Then one day they will become your disaster. What you need to do is to cultivate Azuras that are absolutely loyal to you. However, just as he was speaking, the king of Chengkong had already played with the axe in his golden bell. At this moment, cracks appeared on the golden bell. Although the Azuras were scattered, their power was still added to the king of Chengkong. There were sounds of collision, followed by a clear cracking sound. "Little human, how dare you try to shake the position of a god?" After finishing this sentence, this guy directly chopped at Lin Yuan with his axe with monstrous killing intent. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan did not dodge. Instead, he directly faced the axe head-on, and directly punched the blade of the axe head with a fierce punch. Lin Yuan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. This was because he realized that the power used by this guy who was rushing towards him felt very familiar. It was as if it was a power that came from the origin. His expression changed slightly. At this time, although he had already touched the opponent's attack, it did not mean that the opponent would give up. At this moment, the god fiend roared wildly, and the power on his body increased exponentially. This god fiend was like an endless fighting machine. Chapter 1268. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan snorted coldly. Of course, he could see that no matter what trick this guy was playing at this moment, it was actually a silent struggle. At this moment, when Little Iron Egg saw this scene, he was slightly shocked. Because he could feel that at this moment, there seemed to be no power in his master's body. It was as if he was completely isolated from the world at this moment. Moreover, this was a method of isolation that cut off power, which was something that no one had expected. At this moment, the old turtle had already begun to think about his escape route. In his opinion, the demon god in front of him was too terrifying, and he had already heard of the legend of the demon god. Therefore, he only wanted to escape. Only in this way could he save his life. But at this moment, Lin Yuan's mouth suddenly emitted a sound that sounded like a large bell. The unintelligible syllables came out of his mouth, as if they were chimes. The demon god stood there for a long time without coming back to his senses. He seemed to have lost his mind at this moment, and it seemed that he had no way to resist this power at all. Little Iron Egg's eyes became fervent again. He naturally knew that his master's strength was tyrannical, and it was not something that he could speculate about at all. But seeing the change in the scene, he was also a little curious. He did not know what kind of method this sound used to subdue the demon god so easily. Or rather, it was not accurate to say that the demon god's strength had been reduced, because now the demon god seemed to have been assimilated by this power. He stood there and stared blankly at Lin Yuan in front of him. He did not dare to move at all. The old turtle also seemed to have not reacted at all. He could not even believe what was happening in front of him. What's going on? What kind of power is this? How can it make the demon god submit? Lin Yuan naturally heard the old turtle's words, but he did not care. Instead, he gently waved his hand. It doesn't matter what kind of power this is. You have to see that the demon god is just a defeated opponent in front of me. After saying this, he walked towards the demon god in front of him. The demon god's body began to shrink until it was about the same size as Little Iron Egg. Lin Yuan said faintly, "Is this guy considered to be at the pinnacle of the vast ancient path?" Lin Yuan looked directly at the old turtle next to him. The old turtle clearly didn't react. At this moment, this guy actually questioned him like this. He nodded gently, then shook his head. "Although I don't know who you are, based on the means you have displayed, you should be able to crush the many monster kings in the vast ancient road. But you mustn't underestimate the enemy, because the power of the Church of God here is beyond your imagination. So no matter what kind of thoughts you have, it's best not to put them into action. Because you have to think of this. The only one who can control this demon god is the Church of Gods." Lin Yuan frowned. Of course, he knew that this was the territory of the Church of Gods, but he didn't care. For him, the so-called Church of Gods was just a stone in front of him. As long as he wanted to, he could move this stone away anytime and anywhere. He gently reached out and pointed at the demon god in front of him. "Transform into your figure for me. We'll go straight to where we should go." After saying this, he turned around and left without any hesitation. Since there was no one on the vast ancient road who could compete with this demon god, there was no need to hesitate anymore. Now, he would let this demon god return to that small barren city with endless horror. Starting from this small barren city, step by step, he would build this place into his own path of retreat, a city that belonged to him. The old turtle, however, turned pale with fright. This was tantamount to a face-to-face confrontation with the god-worship sect. If it really came to this point, the Church of Gods would definitely not let them go so willingly. Instead, they would send their most tyrannical guys to fight against them. Lin Yuan certainly felt the worry of these old turtles at this moment, but he didn't care. Instead of saying that these guys were going to deal with him, it was better to say that he was going to deal with these guys from the Church of Gods. No matter what happened in the end, Lin Yuan could completely decide these things by himself. Although Little Iron Egg didn't know what kind of strength his master had, he could see that the power his master brought at this moment, and the boldness he showed, was not something ordinary people could have. "Master, are we going back now?" Little Iron Egg didn't know what Lin Yuan's next step was. So he was going to ask directly. Lin Yuan nodded. "Of course. If we don't go back now, when will we go back?" Now, it could be said that everything was ready. He only knew that with the power of this demon god, he could make the people in this city believe in him again and absorb their incense with such power. He could enjoy their worship. Moreover, he could clearly feel that no matter what he did, these guys would not raise any objections. Lin Yuan's expression was a little subtle, but the old turtle next to him had a strange look on his face. He now had no choice but to follow this crazy guy in front of him. He knew that he couldn't deal with this guy at all with his strength, but what was he going to do now? However, when they returned, they didn't expect that the so-called heroes were still waiting for them at the entrance. Seeing their shadows, the heroes all rushed up. "You actually came out alive. I didn't expect you to have such strength. But why are there such changes in your bodies?" "Changes?" Lin Yuan frowned slightly. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He found that the demon god behind him seemed to be emitting a special kind of energy fluctuation, and it spread to the three of them. Lin Yuan was a little surprised. He didn't expect such a thing to happen in front of him. He didn't even know what was going on in front of him. Looking at the changes in front of him, he looked to the side in confusion. Chapter 1269. Little Iron Egg naturally knew nothing about this matter, but the old turtle beside him definitely knew something about it. In fact, although this demon god is terrifying as long as he sincerely submits and is imprisoned, he will emit a special kind of energy fluctuation. This kind of energy fluctuation is supplied to the vast ancient road. Lin Yuan nodded. He already understood what was going on. It turned out that this demon god's physical strength had always been the fundamental reason why the demon kings in the vast ancient road could improve their realms. As for the desert wolf demon king from before, it was simply unable to withstand the pressure inside, which was why it was pushed out. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly. He looked at the brave warriors in front of him and said, "Are you talking about the power given by these demon gods?" Lin Yuan naturally disdained this kind of power, because for him, this kind of thing was simply a hair on Junyo's body, and it had no effect at all. But for others and even ordinary people, it meant something different. This was because the benefits they could obtain were self-evident. This was especially true for the brave ones. They had been stuck at a bottleneck for many years. But at this moment, when they showed it, when they wanted to have some interaction with Lin Yuan and the others, everyone's expressions suddenly froze. This was because they felt that the benefits were real and could not be faked. At this moment, their expressions were all filled with joy because they could see that they had gained benefits at this moment. "Who the hell are you? You can actually make this demon god work for you." But after he said this, all the brave warriors understood that this matter was unusual. The fact that the other party could make the demon god submit to him was already a problem. Little Iron Egg took a step forward and said, "As long as you are willing to submit to my master, you can also get this special power. But don't blame me for not reminding you that this power can't be given to you casually. You have to exchange it with absolute loyalty." Lin Yuan didn't say anything. The old turtle beside him directly said, "That's right. Only those who follow Mr. can attain the Tao. He's a rare almighty in this world." At this point, he could already be considered to have a clear view of the situation. He could see what was going on with these people in front of him. He also knew that he had obtained tangible benefits, which was why he said those words at this moment. In his opinion, since things had already come to this point, he had no choice but to do so. Lin Yuan didn't say anything, but the brave warriors looked at him completely differently. The expressions of these fellows changed more or less, but they immediately knelt down and kowtowed. "We're willing to submit. In this borderland, in this chaotic world, having more power meant more ability to protect oneself. Lin Yuan, of course, understood their intentions. These guys weren't loyal yet, so at this moment, he had made a decision in his heart. How to deal with these so-called brave warriors in front of him. In that case, from today on, you will become a god, a god. Are you willing? As soon as he finished speaking, these people didn't hesitate at all and directly knelt down. Lin Yuan nodded with satisfaction. He knew that since this matter was considered a success, there was nothing else that could stop this group of people. Sooner or later, this city would be under his control. However, he wanted to change his name to Bruiser. No matter what, Bruiser's name was a little vague, and he couldn't say it out loud. He couldn't let everyone else kneel down and shout, "Welcome the great god Bruiser," right? That was 2F** King Lo. When he thought of this, he pointed at Bruiser and said, "From today on, you're the first god of this city, the Azura god." After he finished speaking, the group of people walked towards the barren city. The people of the God Worship Society had already sent people to this city. They might not know about what had happened on the vast ancient road, but they had already been informed about what had happened here. Therefore, at this moment, the God Worship Religion's minions had already been in this frozen city. When Lin Yuan and his group of people arrived outside the city, they heard the ignorant people inside the city, who were still worshipping the God Worship Religion, shouting constantly on the city wall. "How dare you rebel against the will of God? You're courting death. Now that the God Worship Religion has sent people over, don't think that you have any chance at this moment." These people were not polite when they spoke. Obviously, they had been successfully brainwashed by the people of the God Worship Religion. Lin Yuan didn't say anything. Instead, he let the demon god who had appeared before stand in front of him. At this moment, the demon god system was revealed. At this moment, all the people were shocked. They had never seen such a powerful demon god. In their eyes, this was a real god, who was many times more powerful than the monster kings sent by the God Worship Religion. Lin Yuan squinted his eyes and smiled lightly. At this time, Tai Danar also took a step forward. "I am Azura, the new god. Quickly open the city gate and welcome us into the city." Otherwise, when he said this, his body was full of murderous intent. At this moment, the murderous intent was like a substance, completely surrounding him. Seeing this scene, the people in the city no longer dared to say a word. At this time, a group of armored soldiers stood on the city wall. These guys were all from the God Worship Society. At this time, he stood directly on the city wall and said indifferently, "Are you those rebels? It seems that you won't shed tears until you see the coffin." Although he found halfway through his words, this guy didn't dare to continue. This was because he had recognized what was standing behind Lin Yuan and the others. It was a demon god. These guys were all stunned because they didn't expect that a demon god would reveal the truth at this moment. Isn't this the demon god in the vast ancient road? Why is he here? The people of the God Worship Religion naturally recognized that this was the guy they had trapped in the vast ancient road. Lin Yuan smiled faintly and said, "Since you have recognized me, there's no need to talk nonsense. Open the city gate and surrender. Otherwise, I won't show any mercy." Chapter 1270. These guys were all stunned because they didn't expect that the demon god would reveal the truth at this moment. Isn't this the demon god from the vast ancient road? Why is he here? The people of the God Worship sect naturally recognized that this was the guy they had trapped in the vast ancient road. Lin Yuan smiled faintly. "Since you've already recognized me, there's no need to talk nonsense. Open the city gate and surrender. Otherwise, I won't show you any mercy." There was no hesitation in his words. At this moment, when he finished speaking, the people around him were all stunned. At this moment, almost everyone looked at the scene in front of them in confusion. These ignorant people didn't know what was going on because they knew what the so-called demon god of the vast ancient road was. When they heard the name, they couldn't help but be slightly shocked. What the hell is going on? Why has the legendary demon god appeared? Is the God Worship sect not the will of heaven? Have we been worshipping the wrong demon god all this time? Are Iron Egg and the others the will of heaven? These doubts had spread throughout the city. At this time, the people of the god worship sect fiercely slammed the weapons in their hands. Shut up, all of you. It's just a demon god. Since we can seal him in the vast ancient road, we can naturally release him. You're all shaken just because you see this demon god. Do you still have any respect for the god worship sect? These guys had already gone crazy. They directly gave the order. Kill all the people who have just spread rumors. As soon as this sentence was finished, there was a sudden scream on the city wall. Seeing the blood dripping from the city wall, Little Iron Egg's expression suddenly became angry. He could no longer suppress the bloody aura on his body. At this moment he almost rushed up. Lin Yuan pulled him from behind. As a god, you should have the identity and attitude of a god. After saying this, he directly pulled the old turtle to the front. Launch your first attack on these guys from God Worship Society. I don't believe that these guys will be so unscrupulous. After Lin Yuan finished speaking, the old tortoise's expression immediately turned bitter. He didn't want to offend anyone at all. After hearing Lin Yuan's words, he reluctantly took 2 steps forward. However, he had no choice but to bow his head under the eaves. He naturally understood that in this situation, he had no chance to resolve the matter in front of him no matter what. Or rather, his strength wasn't enough to resolve the matter in front of him at all. However, at this time, he was pushed to the cusp of the storm. Now, the people in front of him left him with no choice. On one hand, they were people who could subdue even the demon god, and on the other hand, they were deeply rooted in god worship. All right, this old man will take the lead. As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed forward. At this moment, his weapon, his tortoise shell, suddenly appeared in his hand. At this moment, he wanted to defeat the enemy with one strike and gain the upper hand by showing his strength. At least, he wanted to make everyone look better. In fact, what he didn't expect was that the moment he swung his weapon, the people of the Church of Gods would unite to resist him. You're just 2 monster kings. How dare you be so arrogant and wanton? Get out of my sight. As soon as the old tortoise's voice fell, his figure directly retreated. Lin Yuan naturally saw that this guy didn't use his full strength. He also saw that the God Worship Society wanted to use this old tortoise to establish their prestige, but how could he give this guy such a chance? He almost didn't hesitate to let the demon god rush up. At this moment, he didn't care about the lives of these guys. He knew that it was better to kill them directly than to let these guys waver. After all, this was the only way to make them obediently surrender. Sometimes, ruthless means were more effective than gentle means. It was at this moment that the humans began to attack without knowing what was going on. But how could they compete with the demon god? No matter how strong these humans were, they couldn't compete with this demon god, not even the people of God Worship Society. Back then, in order to seal this demon god, they had spent a lot of effort. At this moment, everyone was already staring at the small piece of land in front of them. The demon god directly opened the city gate with a punch. Lin Yuan swaggered in with Little Bruiser. At this moment, no one dared to stop them, not even the people of God Worship Society. At this moment, they seemed to be the absolute masters of this place. This change at the moment shocked everyone. Many people didn't understand what was going on. But at this moment, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. Destroy this city. Anyway, this city will be rebuilt from today onwards. As soon as he finished speaking, the demon god behind him began to destroy the surrounding city walls without hesitation. All the humans had a pained expression on their faces. They felt that they had no hope of living, but they didn't expect that the demon god didn't kill them. Instead, when they came into close contact with the demon god and showed their submission, a special power spread throughout their bodies. This was the power that the demon god gave them, just like a halo. Seeing that everyone had stopped talking, Lin Yuan's movements became more and more natural. He walked directly to the center of the city. In his opinion, building a city wasn't that difficult, but there were still some things that needed to be done. For example, in the current situation, these humans had to receive the corresponding benefits. Furthermore, they had to stabilize their worship of Little Bruiser as a god. Of course, Lin Yuan knew that it was more difficult to govern a city than to build one directly. Therefore, he did not hesitate to start the layout. He wanted to let Little Iron Egg give small favors to the residents of these cities. This way, he could accumulate the worship of these humans to the gods. But at this time, the people of the Church of Gods gathered together. Obviously, they didn't expect that Little Bruiser and the others could seize the city so easily at this moment. Lin Yuan could see that these guys wanted to deliver a fatal blow. Chapter 1271. But just as he was thinking about this, Little Iron Egg had already walked out. Little Iron Egg had a good grasp of the situation. He knew that in order to become a god, he had to do some things that a god should do. At this moment, Yi Shiwen was thinking about how to finish this matter. Since these people of the god worship religion refused to give up, then he must teach them a profound lesson. At this moment, Lin Yuan had already walked directly in front of everyone. He didn't make any unnecessary movements. He just quietly watched Little Iron Egg collide with the people of the god worship religion in front of everyone. The strength of the people of the god worship religion wasn't too high, but they had the advantage of numbers, and their movements were uniform. Lin Yuan knew that this was a test for Little Iron Egg. If he wanted to become a god that everyone in the city believed in, he had to face such a test alone. When the old turtle saw this scene, he didn't quite believe it. You're not worried about letting him deal with these people of the god worship religion alone? You should know that each of these people is not weak. And now that they have gathered together, it's very likely that they will directly destroy the little god you created. The old turtle's voice wasn't loud, but Lin Yuan's expression suddenly became cold. Just like what you said, I can tell you clearly that at this moment, no one can stop him because he doesn't have as many hidden thoughts as you do. I know you don't want to offend either side, but have you ever thought that since you've joined my camp, you've already drawn a clear line between you and me? Lin Yuan wanted to let the old turtle see the situation clearly. The reason why he spared the old turtle's life was that he knew that this guy was definitely not ordinary, and he was different from ordinary demon kings. That was why he kept this guy by his side all the time. He also understood that Little Iron Egg alone couldn't govern such a city. Little Iron Egg lacked both experience and experience. Although he was relatively strong, at this moment, no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't be able to govern this city well without corresponding assistance. Lin Yuan wanted to use this city as an escape route. Therefore, he had long had this old turtle in mind. It was even more impossible for him to let this old turtle escape in this situation. The reason why he let him be the first to rush up was for this scene. Seeing the changes at this moment, Lin Yuan smiled lightly. The old turtle knew that he had no way out now. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't break free from the young man's grasp. It was as if he was trapped in a huge chessboard. No matter how he moved, he was just a chess piece. He looked at the human in front of him. He knew that no matter what, he was no match for this person. Whether it was in terms of strength or intelligence, he had no way of contending against this person. Helplessly, he finally sighed softly. I thought that after living for so many years, I should be able to see through the implementation, but I didn't expect that I still couldn't outguess you. You've already thought of everything I've thought in advance. Lin Yuan gently shook his head. If you simply wanted to live a stable life, you wouldn't have chosen to stay in that tower. You have ambition and wisdom, but you blindly do everything to defeat Little Iron Egg. This is your courage. As long as you wholeheartedly assist him, I guarantee that your future achievements will be much greater than you can imagine. After Lin Yuan finished speaking softly, he turned his head to look at the battlefield on the side. Little Iron Egg was now covered in blood. His strength wasn't that tyrannical, but his methods were powerful. No matter how severe his injuries were, the Azura blood would heal him. Moreover, at this moment, no matter who wanted to deal with him, they would become his target. He was like a wild beast on this battlefield. Generally, no matter who dared to touch a hair on his head, he would not hesitate to attack that person. His arms, head, shoulders, knees, almost all of them were his weapons. Every inch of his body seemed to be a weapon. In addition, his whole body was covered in blood mist. At this moment, he really looked like a god. He stood in the battlefield like a god of slaughter. Even under the siege of these people from the god-worship religion, he didn't show any signs of weakness. On the contrary, the more he fought, the braver he became. At this moment, the blood mist in his body slowly condensed and began to condense into one Azura shadow after another. Lin Yuan was very satisfied with him. He didn't expect that little iron egg could be broken to this level. It seemed that a natural Azura was really extraordinary. At this moment, all of his strength seemed to have flourished. He even began to use the murderous aura on his body to condense one Azura after another. When they saw this scene, almost everyone stood there in a daze. No one could believe that this stubborn little boy, who kept kneeling on the ground, or refused to kneel, would suddenly become a god. They couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. But now, everything was happening in front of them. Little Iron Egg's murderous aura had spread out. Even the people from the god-worship religion didn't dare to act rashly at this moment. The ground was littered with broken limbs of the people from the god-worship religion. At this moment, almost no one could use this special method to awaken every Azura that was originally sleeping in their body. Lin Yuan could see that little Iron Egg could control his murderous aura to attack someone. At this time, the blood-red spear in his hand began to condense, as if all of his strength had been condensed on the spear at this moment. Wherever the spear went, it was invincible. He really did have the bearing of a deity, but this was far from enough. He had wasted too much time. Lin Yuan finally seemed to be a little impatient. He said to the battlefield, "Little Iron Egg has played enough. Let's get rid of these guys. Don't waste any more time. We have to let the people rebuild the city, and our brave warriors need to be trained at this moment." As soon as he finished speaking, Little Iron Egg nodded. At this moment, all the brave warriors rushed into the battlefield and killed all the people from the god-worship religion. Chapter 1272. The death of the god-worship sect's people stunned everyone. They didn't expect that the god-worship sect, whom they had once regarded as gods, would have no room for resistance at this moment. Not only that, but almost all the warriors rushed forward to kill the god-worship sect's people. Not only did they kill them, but they also cut off their heads. Little Iron Egg even used a long spear to string the heads together. These are the gods you worshipped in the past. Other than exploiting you, they will not give you any benefits. If you don't sacrifice your own fairness, they will punish you. Is this the kind of life you want? Little Iron Egg's words left these people speechless. They could see that at this moment, no matter who it was, the child in front of them was no longer the same as before. He was clearly a killing god. At this moment, his appearance seemed to represent some kind of special signal. He was telling everyone that he was the god here. Everyone must submit to him unconditionally. It was precisely because of this state, coupled with the threat of the demon god behind him, and the more unfathomable existence of Lin Yuan, that everyone could not help but shake their heads gently at this moment. If they wanted to preserve their last bit of stubbornness before, they didn't have the chance to do so now. They were no longer in the same state as before. Now was the time for a change of dynasty. The god-worship sect's people were killed like weeds. Little Iron Egg, you have offended the gods. Do you know what kind of crime it is? An old man next to him said this sentence. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He wanted to see how Little Iron Egg would deal with this matter. Little Iron Egg, on the other hand, turned his head abruptly to look at the old man. This old man was a person of virtue and prestige in this desolate city. In the eyes of others, he was a prophet and the messenger of the god-worship sect. No matter which member of the god-worship sect, when they wanted to convey some kind of wish, they would say it through his mouth. Seeing that his identity was being threatened, he was not prepared to leave any other thoughts at this moment. In other words, he wanted to make a final struggle. At least, he wanted to squeeze the last bit of value out of this boy in front of him and keep his identity. Even if he no longer had any contact with the god-worship sect, he wanted to make this Little Iron Egg in front of him sincerely. He still wanted to live a life where he was second only to one person and above tens of thousands of people. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and looked at Little Iron Egg quietly. Little Iron Egg snorted and said, "From now on, I'm telling all of you that my name is not something you can call out. From now on, you have to call me Shura God." As soon as he said that, everyone around him was stunned. No one would have thought that the once stubborn child would actually speak to them in such a tone. At that moment, Little Iron Egg's ferocious appearance was clearly saying, "If you don't agree to my terms, I can kill you right now." The moment he finished his sentence, the deity warden behind him snorted coldly. Then he hammered the ground with his arm. At that moment, the whole city seemed to shake. At that moment, everyone was scared, except for the old man. He felt that his face was about to be trampled on. "Sinner, sinner. You actually colluded with these demons. Now, you're even more rebellious. You want to kill those who have helped you. How can you be a god? You can't be compared to those people of the god worship sect." As soon as he finished speaking, the people present were a little shaken. In their deep-rooted minds, the god worship sect was the orthodox god. Therefore, at this moment, they were more or less a little strange. At this moment, they were shaken. They felt that Little Iron Egg in front of them was simply a heinous villain. However, they were not willing to confront Little Iron Egg directly in front of them, because they could see that the deity warden wasn't the only one behind Little Iron Egg. There were also those heroes who were on his side. Although they felt that being a deity warden was indeed good, they didn't want to give up their persistence. At that moment, Little Iron Egg snorted coldly. He shook the spear in his hand and directly pierced the old man's throat. "I've just said that I'm the Azura god." When he said those words and his actions, everyone was shocked. No one dared to say a word. At this moment, Lin Yuan nodded with satisfaction. He knew that Little Iron Egg was now qualified to be the Azura god. Or rather, in his opinion, Little Iron Egg was at least qualified right now. He took a step forward. For these people, nothing more than a guarantee of life. No matter which god they worshipped, the final result would be the same. There would be no other accidents. Therefore, at this moment, Lin Yuan had made other preparations. He waved his hand gently and said, "From today onwards, this city will be rebuilt. Every day, everyone can receive several times your usual living remuneration from me. Of course, the premise is that you have to believe in the god in front of you." When he finished speaking, Lin Yuan had already turned around and walked into a house, and Little Iron Egg also quickly followed him. "Master, what should we do next?" "If that's the case, driving away and killing these people of the Church of Gods will definitely not let it go. They will definitely make other moves." After saying that, the old tortoise opened his mouth. He had been following Little Iron Egg just now. At this moment, he was guiding him. It was time for him to perform. At this moment, he sighed softly and said, "Actually, this matter is not too difficult to solve. With our current strength, it's not impossible to deal with the god worship sect." He glanced at Lin Yuan next to him. In fact, both of them were well aware of the situation now. The old turtle had no other way to leave their camp. No matter how much he wanted to return to the god worship sect, it was absolutely impossible. Now, Lin Yuan's thoughts had begun to change. He was going to use the old turtle to do something that he might not be able to do. At least, he could use the old turtle's identity, or more accurately, his former identity, to provoke the people of the god worship sect and make them lose their minds. Chapter 1273. Lin Yuan said slowly, "I've already thought about it. The way to deal with the god worship sect is to use you." After saying this, his eyes were already fixed on the old turtle. At this moment, the old turtle felt a chill all over his body involuntarily. He said with an unnatural expression, "What can I do?" On the surface, he seemed to be siding with Yi Shiwen's faction, but he was a cunning man. If Yi Shiwen left him to Little Iron Egg, he might cause problems in the future. Therefore, Yi Shiwen had to unify his interests. Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Naturally, I want you to break through your limits at this stage. Or to be more precise, what you should do now is to use your own means to make the people of the god worship sect angry with us. Let them all rush out. That's the best way." Hearing this, the old turtle's expression changed abruptly. He had vaguely guessed what the man in front of him was going to do, but he was not sure about his conjecture. You mean you want me to lure all the people of the God worship sect out and then kill them all in one fell swoop? When he said these words, his expression was tense because he knew that if he were to do this, it would be difficult for him to get a good result. Moreover, it was very likely that he would get himself killed. This was not what he wanted to achieve. As soon as his expression changed, Lin Yuan already knew what he was thinking. At this moment, he nodded slightly. That's exactly what you're saying. I'm going to lure all the people of God worship religion here. I want everyone to see how they're going to be defeated here. Although his words were frivolous, the old turtle did not think that the man in front of him was frivolous because he felt that this man was fully capable of doing such a thing. He also knew clearly what the consequences would be if such a thing really happened. Thinking of this, the old turtle could not help but sigh. Why do you have to choose me? I'm not special to the people of the God worship sect, and I don't have any special status in the sect. He wanted to retreat a little, because if he continued to be entangled in this situation, it would not benefit him at all. But right after he finished speaking, Lin Yuan had already stood up. Who asked you to be the traitor here? If you weren't a traitor, I wouldn't necessarily need you. His words were not polite at all, and there was even a hint of contempt in them. But that was exactly what he wanted. At this moment, he didn't want to hesitate or stay any longer. He only wanted to resolve this matter once and for all, especially under such circumstances. He wanted to attribute all of this to the old tortoise in front of him. Only in this way could his interests be completely aligned with his, or more accurately, with Little Bruiser's interests. At this moment, Little Iron Egg turned his eyes to her. Master, are we really going to do this? If we do that, what will happen to us? Although he knew that it must have something to do with the Church of God, he wasn't sure why it happened at this time and in this state. Shouldn't they be steadily developing their own forces step by step? In his current state, choosing such a method was not something he could have imagined. Especially Lin Yuan's current behavior, it was obvious that he wanted to fight to the death with the other party. Under such circumstances, a life and death struggle was not a good thing for them. Seeing the change in Little Iron Egg at this moment, Lin Yuan sighed softly. Little Iron Egg, you have been carrying this banner yourself from the beginning to the end, so I'm helping you get rid of a disaster in this battle. If you really leave this disaster behind, I'm afraid it will be detrimental to your future. When the old turtle heard this, he already sensed something else. He felt that the man in front of him was paving a way for his apprentice, and the reason for this was very likely that this so-called master was going to leave. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to use this method to pave the way for his apprentice. When Little Iron Egg thought of this, he didn't have any other thoughts. However, the old tortoise did have some other thoughts in his mind. He even said these words directly. It seems that you don't want to be involved in these worldly affairs anymore, sir. He looked at Lin Yuan with a smile. He knew that if Little Iron Egg was the only one left, his status as a doghead strategist would be stable in the future. At that time, he would really be second only to one person and above everyone else. At least he would be the local tyrant in this place. Then, he would go and eradicate the special Church of God. At that time, there would really be no threat to him. When he thought of this, the old tortoise instantly became happy. He even took the initiative to ask about the reason why Little Iron Egg cooperated with him. If that's the case, I have a plan to lure out all the people of the Church of God, or at least all the branches here, so that they have no way out. When he heard this, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He could see the old tortoise's intention. However, he wanted to use the old tortoise now, so he said directly, "Tell me your plan. If it's feasible, we'll do as you say." As he finished his sentence, he took out a jade pendant from his bosom. This jade pendant was painted with the pattern of the God worship cult. This is the jade pendant of the Church of God. As long as I crush this thing, those people of the Church of God will not hesitate to use this method to come here. At that time, no matter what their purpose is, it will be obvious at this moment. After saying this, the old tortoise smiled. He knew that no one could refuse his method, especially now that the man in front of him was ready to deal with the Church of God. Therefore, his method was definitely the safest way. From this moment on, Lin Yuan was sure that the old tortoise would be his first step in dealing with the Church of God. However, he also wanted to cut off the old tortoise's way of retreat. Chapter 1274. At this critical juncture, whether it was the old turtle or Lin Yuan, they had already fallen into the plan to deal with the worship religion. Little Iron Egg, who was on the side, was certainly surprised. Although he was a child, he was not stupid. He also understood the crux of the matter. "Master, are you going to leave me?" After he finished speaking, the room instantly fell silent. Lin Yuan turned his head to look at him, narrowed his eyes, and smiled slightly. "There is no banquet in the world that does not end, so I will definitely leave you in any case. You don't have to worry about anything, because you are now my backup plan." He didn't seem to hesitate when he said this. He directly grabbed the jade pendant from the old turtle's hand and crushed it in an instant. It was at this moment that a ray of light shot up into the sky. It seemed that there was no time for hesitation. At this moment, the moment this light soared into the sky, it already carried a strange energy fluctuation. Lin Yuan naturally knew what this energy fluctuation was. Or rather, he knew that this energy fluctuation was a message to the god worship sect. At this moment, he didn't hesitate at all. Instead, he said to Little Iron Egg, who was next to him, "From now on, I will confer you as the god of this city. As long as you become a god, you will be able to obtain another way to absorb energy." He was talking about the incense that people worshipped. But at this moment, when Lin Yuan said these words, Little Iron Egg shook his head firmly. "Master, I don't want to leave you." There was almost no hesitation in his words. However, Lin Yuan just sighed softly. Although all of his power came from the system, his own intelligence and hard work were also unique conditions blessed by the heavens. Therefore, at this moment, they didn't want to have any other thoughts. However, what he thought at this moment was naturally not something that Little Iron Egg could guess. He didn't want any problems to arise because of this matter. Therefore, when he supported Little Iron Egg and made him a god, he had already begun to think of his own way out. Lin Yuan suddenly stood up. "It seems that the Church of Gods is not slow. Since they are almost here, why don't we get up and face them?" At this moment, the people of the Church of God were already standing outside. At this moment, they were aggressive. They claimed that they were here to eliminate the traitor. However, there were so many of them at this moment. They were here to deal with Lin Yuan. At this moment, without any hesitation, these people walked to the front step by step. They had besieged the entire city. At this moment, they had already made up their minds. No matter what, they had to resolve this matter. This change had already attracted Lin Yuan's attention. He knew that the people hiding outside were not as simple as they seemed. This time, the people from God worship religion were completely different from the last time. He could clearly sense that the god worship cult had turned out in full force at this moment. However, there was still no change in him. At this moment, the demon god was already standing outside. All of his thoughts had become clear at this moment. He wanted to have a final battle with these people of the god worship religion. At least he could get rid of these guys and solve his worries in the future. This was not only for himself, but also for Little Iron Egg. It was also to give himself a happy ending. At this moment, the old turtle was already standing directly outside the city. "Is the traitor of God worship religion here?" He was now openly provoking these guys. After this sentence came out, everyone's expression changed sharply. They could all feel that the guy standing in front of them was the one who had betrayed them before. However, they did not expect this guy to stand here with such an imposing manner. Lin Yuan also looked at this scene without saying a word. He could feel that at this moment, whether it was the people of God worship religion or the old turtle, there seemed to be a special connection between them. It was a special kind of energy body that intersected with each other between the two sides. Lin Yuan knew that the old turtle was doing everything possible to cut off contact with these people of God worship religion. However, these people of God worship religion seemed to be unwilling to let go. They directly shouted and then rushed up. Seeing this scene in front of him, Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and smiled slightly. "All warriors, listen to me. These are the guys who have enslaved you for many years. Now they are in front of you. What do you want to do?" After he finished speaking, all the warriors raised their heads. They looked at the people of God worship religion in front of them. "Kill! Kill! Kill! Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and rush over." At Lin Yuan's order, the demon god roared and spread his power around to the warriors. At this time, the demon god also took a step forward. Seeing such a scene in front of them at this moment, the people of God worship religion knew that this battle was inevitable. At this moment, they could feel that the old turtle was simply using this method to send their people here to die. Seeing this scene unfold, Lin Yuan's expression was slightly stunned. The next moment, he directly took a step forward. However, he didn't make a move now. He was trying to stimulate the power of the demon god. In this way, these warriors could become stronger and even become existences that could resist the gods. But what he didn't expect was that at this moment, those people of God worship religion actually cast the inescapable net. The so-called inescapable net was a kind of formation. As soon as this formation appeared, it had already enveloped the world. At this moment, the entire city seemed to have become the center of it. Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect that the other side would choose to deal with him in such a way. However, such a formation was too small for the demon god. At this moment, the demon god suddenly raised his big axe and began to swing it to the side. His attacks were exceptionally powerful, and they were able to sever all energy systems. At this moment, the inescapable net formation had just been launched, and it could no longer be controlled and collapsed. Finally, at this moment, the old turtle took out another jade plate when these guys had already begun to flee in all directions. After the jade plate appeared, it directly floated in the air, emitting a ray of light that enveloped everyone. Chapter 1275. The old turtle's methods have been fully displayed, and even Lin Yuan did not expect the guy in front of him to be so powerful. He didn't expect the old turtle to have such a trick up his sleeve. The God worship sect members also noticed the abnormality at this moment. They immediately focused their attention on the scene in front of them. The light, or rather, the cage that appeared around them imprisoned them at this moment. At the same time, a special energy fluctuation appeared in the place where their gazes converged. It was as if an energy vortex had opened. In the middle of this vortex, there were many pitch-black shadows. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He could clearly see the momentum of these guys in front of him the moment they appeared. It must be a backup plan left behind by these God worship sect members. Just as this happened, Lin Yuan suddenly took a step forward. Before he could make a move, Little Iron Egg suddenly stepped forward. Then, the long spear in his hand shook. Along with a ferocious call, an endless amount of blood chi instantly appeared. In an instant, Asuras appeared around him one after another. These Asuras seemed to be a special species born between heaven and earth. Lin Yuan could clearly see that these Asuras were condensed by Little Iron Egg with his killing intent. They were different from the previous Asuras. These Asuras were much stronger than the previous ones. Seeing the situation on Little Iron Egg's side, the God worship sect members didn't panic. Instead, they howled like wolves. After this howl, their bodies began to undergo huge changes. Lin Yuan was stunned because he found that as these guys' bodies continued to grow, their strength also continued to increase. This is law embodiment of heaven and earth? However, he immediately denied this thought. This was because he could sense that although these fellows were using techniques similar to the celestial laws embodiment technique, there were still some differences between them. To be precise, what they were using was a weakened version of law embodiment of heaven and earth. The people of the Church of God laughed out loud. "You fools, you deserve to be controlled. You'll never be able to make a comeback in this lifetime. Under such circumstances, you still dare to challenge us, the Church of God. Today, I'll show you what real power is." These people of God worship religion were unscrupulous and even prepared to slaughter the brave warriors. However, they were defeated by this special formation. They were not strong enough. Although they had the power of the devil god, they had no way to resist the means displayed by these guys in front of them. After all, god worship religion was stronger than them. But at this moment, Bruiser waved his hand, and the Asuras behind him charged forward as if they had gone mad. In just a few seconds, the two sides converged together. Asuras were fated. They did not fear death or pain. They began to charge and fight. Even if they were heavily injured, they did not stop. However, just as he was about to stop, the bodies of the god worship sect members who had used the weakened version of law embodiment of heaven and earth suddenly swelled again in an instant. It was as if they did not care what the people in front of them did. Their bodies grew faster and faster. At this moment, Lin Yuan understood that these people had used law embodiment of heaven and earth for the second time in order to increase their strength again and achieve a crushing effect. However, this method also consumed a lot of their strength. Moreover, their bodies could not withstand such consumption at all. It would only take a moment for them to be beaten back to their original state. Lin Yuan waved his hand fiercely. At this moment, he directly stomped the ground fiercely, and then a blood-colored force surged out of his body. At this moment, those Asuras seemed to have received assistance and enhancement. Seeing this change, their bodies became more solid. Little Bruiser raised his head abruptly. Almost without hesitation, the blood mist on his body began to increase. Little Bruiser roared and stabbed his spear into the ground. Then, with a loud roar, the ground began to roll up. Then, a blood-red mist gathered around. This effect, which was close to doubling their strength, made these Asuras more and more courageous as they fought. They had become the main force of this battle. Little Bruiser looked at his master. He knew that at this moment, if it were not for his master, he would not have been able to resist these guys. At this moment, although he wanted to share his master's burden, at the last moment, he had to rely on his master's strength to fight these people from the god worship sect. Thinking of this, he felt a little discouraged. At this moment, he used this method to prove that he was not so weak. He had accumulated too little strength before, which was why he was stretched thin at this moment. Now, with the boost, he was not afraid of consumption. At this moment, these Asuras and those special guys had collided. After this round of competition, the two sides were now equal. The demon god did not move. Of course, this was Lin Yuan's order. Seeing that these guys were not retreating, Lin Yuan knew that they must have some tricks up their sleeves. They must have some special means that they had not used, or there must be someone supporting them from behind. That was why these guys were so arrogant. Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. Because at this moment, he had already sensed a powerful demonic qi coming towards him. The god worship sect, the so-called god worship sect, was just indulging some monsters. Then they used these monsters to increase their strength. Now, they obviously could not wait any longer. Those guys hiding in the dark finally could not help but make a move. However, the way they attacked was a little unimaginable. This was because it was a huge rock. It was directly displayed in midair. At this moment, all of its movements were almost indiscriminate attacks that did not distinguish between friend and foe. One after another, the feathers pierced down like sharp arrows, and they carried a strange energy. To be precise, it was a special flame. Once these flames fell on the ground, it would cause a large area to burn. At this moment, these flames could engulf everything. Lin Yuan naturally saw the other party's intention. At this moment, he finally released the demon god. The demonic god roared and charged out. He could not wait any longer. Chapter 1276. Lin Yuan smiled faintly. He knew that with the demon god's resistance, this matter would not be too difficult. Moreover, he could clearly feel that these guys had already thought of a way to deal with the demon god. They would not engage in close combat with the demon god. They knew the powerful strength of the demon god, so they did not choose to engage in close combat at all. Instead, they started to shoot these feathers from afar. First, it was the golden-winged roc, followed by the Qing Luo bird and the phoenix bathed in fire. At this moment, all of the demon kings that were flying in the air appeared. Seeing this change, a rainbow light flashed in Lin Yuan's hand, and then a chain appeared directly in the demon god's hand. The demon god waved the rainbow chain in his hand and spun it directly towards the big birds in the air. These big birds were instantly entangled by the iron chain and struggled in midair for a long time, but could not escape. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan's expression changed slightly. He knew that since these people from the god worship sect wanted to fight with him in this last battle, they would not only send out these few demon kings. With the foundation of the god worship sect, they should still have a lot of strength. When Lin Yuan thought of this, he was about to take action, but at this moment he suddenly felt a special force sweeping out. Puffs of smoke began to appear in the field and collided with little iron eggs' blood-red fog, giving off a sizzling sound. It was as if the two types of energy could not be perfectly matched at all, and they were two types of forces that interacted with each other. Seeing this scene, the means that the old turtle had used previously had already been broken. Under the attack of these demon kings such as the golden-winged roc, his cage-like energy had begun to break rapidly. But the old turtle did not want to stop here. At this moment, a wisp of anger had been aroused in his heart. At this moment, he did not want any other accidents to happen. He just wanted to show all his strength. Since there was no way to return to the god worship sect, he already had some clear ideas in his heart. What he needed to do was to get his position right and stand in the most accurate team. At this moment, he didn't want any unnecessary changes to occur. At the next moment, he unleashed all of his power, and the tortoise shell in his hand flew into the air. And at that moment, a knife was hidden in the turtle shell. Once it flew out, it was like a machine that harvested lives. Most of the people from the Church of Gods had fallen, but more and more monster kings appeared in the field. At this time, the bird-type monster kings were struggling in midair. At the same time, a few other monster kings, who looked strong and muscular, had appeared. They were all distracting the demon god. Seeing this scene, the demon god began to shake the iron chain in his hand. Although he couldn't contend against the combined forces of all the monster kings, he still managed to stimulate a trace of madness. His body involuntarily emitted some special energy. All of this energy was absorbed by the brave ones. At the same time, the brave ones seemed to have become believers of the demon god. Their powers complemented each other and helped each other. Well, when seeing this scene, Lin Yuan did not have the slightest intention to stop it. He even indulged it a little. It was as if he didn't want to stop it after seeing all this with his own eyes. He even wanted more people to absorb the power of the demon god and form a bond with him. Only in this way could the people present begin to become more tyrannical. It was also at this moment that Lin Yuan's expression began to change. He was ready to take action. He knew that if he persisted in this situation, he was afraid that it would not do him any good. But just as he was thinking about this matter, a light suddenly fell from the sky. It was a pure gold carriage. As soon as the carriage appeared, golden bricks began to appear one after another. Then, they slowly floated in the air. However, these weren't real gold bricks. Instead, they were pieces of energy gathered together. Following closely behind was a group of warriors in golden armor. They were charging straight towards them. The mortals in the city were scared silly. They had never seen such a magnificent scene before. At this moment, all their thoughts were thrown to the back of their minds. They only knew how insignificant they were compared to these people. Previously, they had looked down on Little Iron Egg. But at this moment, they had long turned their contempt into worship. It was pure worship for killing. Or rather, worship for power. Just as Lin Yuan was about to take action, Little Iron Egg once again erupted with an unimaginable power. This guy shouted, "Endless slaughter!" Then, an extremely majestic power surged in front of him and behind him. The murderous aura around him seemed to have condensed into a sea of blood. Waves of valiant power impacted the entire scene at this moment. Furthermore, what no one had expected was that the moment this power rushed out, it had already begun to sweep across the entire area. Everyone seemed to be unable to control themselves when they came into contact with this sea of blood. The people on their side became extraordinarily powerful after being strengthened by this sea of blood. As for the people on the other side, when they came into contact with this sea of blood, they only felt the endless power of killing. This series of changes caught the people of the Church of Gods unprepared. The gradually increasing number of monster kings also saw this scene. They were about to rush over, but Lin Yuan directly made his move at this moment. His body stepped in the air, and his body rose from the ground. Then, step by step, he seemed to be stepping on the backs of these monster kings. Waves of ferocious power emanated from his body. Or more accurately, it was a special aura that emanated from him. It was an aura that looked down on the world and made everyone in the world bow their heads. Whether it was mortals or monster kings. Almost none of them could raise their heads. They bowed their heads countless times. The moment they stubbornly tried to raise their heads, they involuntarily lowered their heads again. You want to go against me? Let's see if you have the qualifications. After saying this, Lin Yuan's figure was already above the crowd. He directly rushed toward the golden carriage. He knew that with his subordinates, even the demon gods, could not resist the guy in the golden carriage. So he decided to take action himself. Chapter 1277. Lin Yuan had just made a move, or rather, he hadn't made a move at all. His aura alone was enough to make everyone unable to raise their heads. Seeing this, Little Bruiser, the demon god, the warriors, and Azuras all felt as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They raised their heads and roared together. Their voices shook the wilderness. However, the sect of gods had been famous for a long time. How could they let them go so easily? Or rather, how could these guys let them do whatever they wanted? Just as Lin Yuan rose into the air, a strong aura suddenly descended. It was a guy flapping his wings in the air. This guy with flapping wings was one of the 4 great guardian warriors of the sect of gods. The moment this guy appeared, Lin Yuan frowned slightly. He found that this guy's strength was too strong. Even if all the people below joined forces, they would still be no match for this guy. At this moment, the moment this guy appeared, all the monster kings of the sect of gods, as well as the crowd, involuntarily knelt down. My lord! The moment he said that, it was clear who he was. Lin Yuan frowned slightly. You are the master of these minions. As soon as Lin Yuan finished speaking, the guy's wings vibrated. Then, a thunderbolt shot out from his wings. Seeing such a scene, Lin Yuan did not even dodge, but the people next to him were shocked, because everyone could feel that this guy had just flapped his wings, and it had already brought about the momentum of a thunderbolt. If they were to really let this fellow attack them, no one would feel good. Lin Yuan didn't move. He just stood there and watched the scene in front of him. This kind of test is meaningless to me. After saying this, he waved his hand and the thunderbolt disappeared. Sparks seemed to have appeared in the eyes of the two of them. No one said anything. No one dared to take a second look because everyone could clearly see the scene that had appeared in front of them. This was not a battle they could participate in at all. Or rather, there was no room for them to participate in this battle. This was not a battle at their level at all. The two of them could easily kill everyone present. Therefore, whether it was the people of the sect of gods or Titan, they all retreated at this moment. They knew that at this moment, they couldn't participate in such a battle at all. They could only watch from afar. Finally, the guy flapping his wings sneered. I am the Lord of Hell of the sect of gods. Now that you have slaughtered my disciples and followers, it's time to settle the score with them. After saying this, he slowly landed on the ground. Lin Yuan smacked his lips. If they didn't provoke me, why would I kill them? Moreover, since you are the Lord of Hell of the sect of gods, why didn't you show up at the beginning? Why did you only show up after these guys died? In my opinion, you just want to use these guys as scapegoats. As soon as Lin Yuan finished speaking, the Lord of Hell sneered. We are all people with such cultivation, so there's no need to waste any more time. Do you think it's possible to provoke me with such nonsense? The Lord of Hell seemed to have seen through Lin Yuan. After saying this, Lin Yuan's expression suddenly changed. He directly took a step forward. I didn't want to waste time with you, but seeing you standing here and chattering, I have to give you a chance. Otherwise, you won't even have a ceremony to show up. Wouldn't that be even more embarrassing? This was obviously a provocation to the so-called Lord of Hell. The people under the Lord of Hell began to curse loudly. They were all the trusted followers of the Lord of Hell. At this moment, they were also unceremoniously waving flags for their boss. However, Lin Yuan's cold eyes made all these people shut up. At that moment, he poured all of his energy and thoughts into it. He was using this moment to tell everyone that he was the king's Tao. He was the master of this world. The next moment, the Lord of Hell suddenly flashed and directly stepped in front of Lin Yuan. Just like that, the two of them collided with each other, using their own aura to suppress each other. This feeling was as if two people were purely fighting with each other. However, the way they fought with each other was too dangerous. Almost in an instant, all the aura between heaven and earth began to become chaotic. It was as if no one could withstand this blow. At this moment, not only did Lin Yuan not take a step back, but he also suppressed his opponent step by step. Finally, this guy, the Lord of Hell, couldn't hold on any longer. He couldn't help but flap his wings and retreat. Don't waste time doing things. Let's fight to the death. Lin Yuan, right? Today, I'll let you know how powerful the Lord of Hell is. As soon as he finished speaking, he launched his attack without any hesitation. It was also at this moment that Lin Yuan also launched an attack. However, this time, his body was entangled with a seven-colored light, while his opponent's body was covered with a golden light. Lord of Hell, Heavenly River. With one move, the golden carriages and golden soldiers in the sky all rushed down at this moment. They were like a special kind of attack that directly swept towards this side. As soon as this attack was launched, Lin Yuan already stopped talking. This was because he had already realized that this kind of attack and method of attack was not completely directed towards him. On the contrary, it was directed towards the people behind him. This guy didn't intend to fight him head-on from the beginning. Instead, he wanted to use this opportunity to attack the people behind him. As long as he killed all the people behind him and left Lin Yuan alone, he would naturally win. Thinking of this, Lin Yuan suddenly snorted coldly. Then, a bloody mist spread out from his body and directly connected to Little Iron Egg's body. At this moment, Little Iron Egg couldn't control himself at all. He suddenly laughed wildly, and then a thick bloody mist spread out from his body. The spreading blood mist shrouded everything in its vicinity. After doing all this, Lin Yuan didn't explain anything. He just wanted to use this opportunity to let Little Iron Egg experience this level of attack. This action was undoubtedly a provocation to the Lord of Hell. As one of the 4 great guardian warriors of the God worship sect, how can I tolerate your provocation? You actually let your subordinates resist my method. You're courting death. Chapter 1278. Lin Yuan smiled faintly. I don't think this is a provocation. At this moment he had already turned around, and Little Iron Egg had already charged into the air. As he moved, the blood-red mist in the sky started to condense. Lin Yuan didn't say anything. He was just using this method to tell the so-called Nether King standing in front of him. All of his power wasn't something the Nether King could pry into. His little disciple could make the Nether King wish he was dead. Of course, Little Iron Egg hadn't reached that stage yet. He was just resisting the Nether King's methods. However, he could feel that his master seemed to have used a method to enlighten him. His strength had become extraordinarily strong, and he could even feel the rising power filling his body. Lin Yuan didn't say anything. Instead, he looked to the side. Since you want to attack my people, it would be rude if I didn't return the favor. After saying this, he stomped his feet. As soon as this method was displayed, the demon god behind Lin Yuan had already pounded his chest and kept roaring. From today onwards, I'll show you what the strongest damage is. After Lin Yuan said this, Little Iron Egg landed on the demon god's head. In just an instant, their auras seemed to overlap. This kind of overlap wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. A ferocious aura engulfed the entire place. At this moment, Lin Yuan actually took a step back. Seeing this, the Nether King didn't understand what was going on. He was even a little puzzled. Did he see wrongly? What? Are you scared now? You actually want to retreat? Are you trying to avoid a fight? Lin Yuan just smiled and shook his head. Finally, he pointed behind him. With your level, you're not my opponent. Look behind you. That's your opponent. You're worthy of being my opponent. He was referring to Little Iron Egg, who was riding on the demon god. Previously, he had used his own methods to forcibly raise Little Iron Egg's strength. Now, the demon god was showing its usefulness. The demon god could stabilize Little Iron Egg's strength. Furthermore, it allowed him to stabilize his current cultivation base. That was the most important thing. The current Little Bruiser was completely different from before. Seeing this, Lin Yuan's expression began to change. He realized that Little Iron Egg's body wasn't just burning with blood mist. His entire body was burning with a ball of fire. That was because his blood had started to boil because of the nourishment. At this moment, Lin Yuan's behavior began to change significantly. At this moment, Little Iron Egg was like a burning fireball. His eyes had turned dark red, and his entire body was covered in blood-red flames. The next moment, he charged straight at the Nether King. He no longer had any scruples. His entire body was covered with killing intent. It was as if everything about him had changed at this moment. At this moment, Lin Yuan's mind began to change slowly. He knew that Little Iron Egg's strength was getting stronger and stronger. He was prepared to ascend to godhood on the spot. Although he had always told Little Iron Egg that he could ascend to godhood, he hadn't done anything. Now, he didn't want to delay or hesitate. He wanted to let the person in front of him know that they were facing a true god. When Lin Yuan thought of this, he did not hesitate and directly took out the map in his hand. Then, a ray of light shot out from the map. Lin Yuan gently pointed his finger at Little Iron Egg. From today onwards, I confer you the title of Azura God. You will be in charge of protecting this pure land. As soon as he finished speaking, thunder rumbled in the sky. This was heavenly thunder. It was completely different from other types of thunder. At this moment, Little Iron Egg's battle intent became even stronger. The Nether King beside him snorted coldly. So what? You want to use these tricks to deceive me? Do you think I will fall for your tricks? Nether King, heavens explode. The golden energy bricks in the sky began to become restless. These fellows were like raindrops that swept towards the ground. However, their final target was Little Bruiser. This was the Nether King's strongest move. Originally, Lin Yuan should have been the one to bear this move. However, it had already landed on Little Iron Egg. However, Little Iron Egg didn't seem to be afraid. He even roared madly, causing the thunder in the sky to fall on his body. Break for me! With a loud roar, the spear in his hand surged out and shattered the sky. Little Iron Egg stood upright in the sky like a real god. He looked down at the people on the ground as if they were ants. The blood-red flames started to converge into his body. The thunder wrapped around his spear. The spear didn't just shatter the golden energy bricks. It also seemed to make the sky tremble. Suddenly, a special power circulated around Lin Yuan's body. Without the slightest hesitation, he instantly cut off the connection. This was the connection between him and Little Iron Egg. However, this connection required Little Iron Egg to give him power in return. However, he didn't need this little bit of power right now. On the contrary, everything he did seemed to be telling everyone that Little Iron Egg was the god of this place. He was sacred and unchangeable. Lin Yuan had already used this method. At this moment, he didn't hesitate to cut off the connection between him and Little Iron Egg. After that, all the power returned to Little Iron Egg. This fellow's aura had indeed increased explosively once again. Little Iron Egg struck out with his spear again. However, it was completely different from the previous time. At this moment, all of its power was concentrated on the spear, and its target was the Nether King. This move was wrapped in an incomparable power as it charged towards the Nether King in front of him. As for the Nether King, he did not hesitate at all. He waved his hand and tried to drive Little Iron Egg's spear away like before. Unfortunately, he had underestimated Little Iron Egg's strength at this moment. Little Iron Egg's move was so powerful that the Nether King couldn't block it at all. The spear contained the power of the heavenly thunder. It was like two curved snakes as it charged towards the Nether King in front of him. With a flash of light, the Nether King's body was pierced by the spear. Streams of golden blood sprayed out from the wound. The Nether King looked at the scene in front of him in disbelief. Chapter 1279. No one believed that Little Iron Egg had such strength. Of course, Lin Yuan was an exception. Everyone was shocked when they saw this scene. They didn't expect that the so-called four guardian deities of the god worship sect would be so weak in front of him. Because of this change, hope was ignited in the eyes of the heroes. Even the old turtle's expression began to change obviously at this moment. There was a smile on his face. At this moment, he felt that everything was worth it. Or rather, he felt that everything here had stabilized for him. As long as Little Iron Egg could kill the Nether King of the four great guardian warriors, then everything would be easily solved later. Not only that, but when they really intimidated the people of the god worship sect, they would be able to achieve hegemony. At least with this direction as a start, they could clearly see the hope of the future. Not everyone could have this kind of luck. Little Iron Egg directly became a god and fought Pluto, one of the four guardian deities. However, Pluto smiled at this moment. He looked at the scene in front of him and said indifferently, "Do you really think this kind of attack can defeat me?" When he spoke, there was a hint of arrogance in his voice. Little Iron Egg was slightly stunned by this kind of momentum. However, he immediately discovered the other party's hidden technique. In an instant, the Underworld King's body disintegrated into a golden liquid. At this moment, the light from his body began to flow to the side involuntarily and then condensed back into his appearance. When this happened, Lin Yuan, who was standing at the side, didn't seem surprised at all. He seemed to have foreseen this situation. He glanced at Little Iron Egg next to him and said, "This is not enough for you to kill him. If you really want to achieve hegemony and kill him directly, I have a better way to teach you." After saying this, Lin Yuan walked out slowly. At this moment, his every move seemed to be filled with a threatening aura. When the Nether King saw this scene, he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Although he could rely on the ability to decompose his body into golden liquid to avoid fatal injuries, he didn't know why, but when he saw the man in front of him, he felt an indescribable fear. He could only use this method to avoid it. However, his speed was not as fast as Lin Yuan's. Lin Yuan was like a demon from hell. In just a flash, he was already in front of him. Then he stretched out his hand. His finger gently slid across the Nether King's body. A ferocious power bloomed from his finger like a flower. At this time, Lin Yuan turned his head to look at Little Iron Egg. "Did you see that? You have to use this kind of power to attack his body, only then can you kill him in one blow." He was using the Nether King as a punching bag. His goal was to let Little Iron Egg practice. At this moment, Little Iron Egg licked his lips and attacked with his spear again. He had already sensed his master's intention, which was to use his existing power to seal the energy in this fellow's body. Only then would they have a chance to break through the enemy's defenses. Seeing this change, Lin Yuan's expression froze slightly. This was because Little Iron Egg seemed to have given up all his defenses. He knew that he could remind him at this moment, but he did not do so. This was because a battle was to let his opponent feel his own inadequacy. Little Iron Egg tried again and again, but failed again and again. The Nether King was like a ravine in front of him. He could not get over it at all. Although he could injure the Nether King, he would use his liquefied body to dodge every time. At this moment, this change in scene made everyone feel that Little Iron Egg had no hope. At this moment, Little Bruiser seemed to have fallen into a frenzy. He continued to launch attacks with his spear, causing the ground to crack. However, he still could not kill the Nether King. "Madman, you madmen, stop. If this continues, you will die before me." The Nether King finally spoke. He was now afraid of Little Iron Egg's crazy attacks. However, Little Iron Egg did not retreat at all. Instead, his attack speed became faster and faster. "I won't die. I am the Azura god," Little Iron Egg said as he laughed wildly. His crazy words did not surprise anyone. Everyone could see that Little Iron Egg was like a madman at this moment. He kept stabbing his spear into the Nether King's body. However, the Nether King still did not want to give up hope. He looked at Little Iron Egg and said, "I won't stop you if you want to become a divine monarch. However, you must be my enemy." Little Iron Egg did not hold back. "I will only be qualified to become a true Azura god if I kill you, a god in the eyes of others. However, I can also sense that your body's recovery speed is getting slower and slower. You must have consumed a lot of energy." Lin Yuan nodded slightly when he heard this. He knew that Little Iron Egg had understood this after attacking the Nether King repeatedly. Little Iron Egg stabbed his spear into the Nether King's body once again. At this moment, the high and mighty Nether King did not turn into a liquid state. He had consumed a lot of energy. Holding the spear in his hand, the Nether King looked at Little Iron Egg in disbelief and said, "Why do you have to be so crazy? What supported you to become like this?" Lin Yuan shook his head. He could see that the Nether King was reluctant to leave this world. However, what could he do? At this moment, everything seemed to have lost its meaning. Little Iron Egg had finally killed the Nether King and successfully absorbed his power to become the Azura god. He stood on the Nether King's body and looked in the direction of the people from the god worship sect. "Submit or die. Choose for yourselves." His long spear shook, almost without the slightest hesitation. Seeing that Little Iron Egg had completely grown up and was even faintly exuding the aura of a superior, Lin Yuan smiled with relief. Then he sighed. Since things had come to this point, it was time for him to leave. Finally, in the face of Little Iron Egg's powerful strength and naked threat, all the people from the god worship sect chose to submit. Not only them, but the entire god worship sect had been utterly defeated. When the Nether King's body dissipated, everyone knew that the Nether King was actually the legendary hierarch of the god worship sect. He had created his external incarnations and turned them into the 4 great guardian deities. In fact, each of the 4 great guardian deities was only one of his doppelgangers. However, only the Nether King was his real body. Now that the Nether King had been killed, the god worship sect naturally fell into a situation where there was no leader. Lin Yuan stretched out his hand and asked Little Iron Egg to come to his side. "Now that you have become a god, everything can be completely returned to the beginning." Little Iron Egg was stunned. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly raised his head with tears in his eyes. "Master, you're leaving." Although his tone was calm, everyone could see that he was reluctant to part. Lin Yuan nodded gently. "Someone once promised me a big dream. In the dream, almost all the demons in the 9 heavens and 10 lands were under my control. However, the only thing I could not control was myself. Someone promised me a dream, so I could only return the favor and observe the path of freedom." After saying this, he was ready to leave. However, the moment he was about to leave, the sky suddenly changed color. Bolts of lightning swept down. The lightning was as fierce as raindrops. It fell on Lin Yuan like crazy. Everyone saw this scene. Little Iron Egg directly knelt on the ground. Seeing this scene, Lin Yuan only smiled faintly. For him, all of this was a thing of the past. He didn't need anyone to witness it. He only needed to experience it himself. Finally, Lin Yuan felt as if he had been pulled out of this world and out of this space. Another version of himself stood in front of him. "This is the ending you want, right? Assist a god and conquer a world. You can even create a god with your own hands." The other version of himself looked at him and then spoke. Hearing this, Lin Yuan shook his head slightly. "The world I want is pieced together by the 3,000 great Taos. Everyone can enter the Tao." After he said this, the other version of himself suddenly grabbed his neck. "But you can enjoy all of this, but I have to be imprisoned here. I gave you everything you wanted, and I even gave you the system. Everything you have is given to you by me. What right do you have to say that you want to give up at this critical moment?" Lin Yuan was silent for a moment. He looked at the other version of himself in front of him and finally said slowly, "You can only give me everything I want because I asked you to give it to me. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have this chance. Lin Yuan did not say anything else. From how he saw it, everything had been for naught. Moreover, all of his faith and hope had been destroyed. He no longer needed that so-called empty success to prove himself. What he needed was a peaceful inner world that he could create by himself. Perhaps this world was not perfect, but to him, it was enough that he had some new insights. Lin Yuan lightly smiled. From today onwards, everything has come to an end. I don't need to explain myself to anyone, not even you. The other Lin Yuan roared. But I refuse to accept this. No one could refuse to accept this, not even the other version of himself. A trace of a smile appeared on Lin Yuan's face. At that moment, it was as if he had been raised to a higher level. In the next moment, a serious look appeared on his face as he looked at the other version of himself and said calmly, "From now onwards, you can also leave." As soon as he finished speaking, it was as if his words were the law. The entire space suddenly began to collapse. In the next second, Lin Yuan suddenly woke up with a start. Cold. The bone-piercing cold seemed to have penetrated deep into his bones, causing Lin Yuan to shiver. Looking around, he found that he was lying on a beach. His body was wet and he could vaguely feel the dampness and coldness. Looking into the distance, he could see the distant skyscrapers reflecting the rays of the sun. "I'm back?" Lin Yuan was somewhat dumbfounded. Once again, he lowered his head to look at the clothes he was wearing. Wasn't this the set of clothes that he had worn when he had jumped into the sea to commit suicide? In other words, he did not die. Instead, he was washed to the beach by the waves? Everything that had happened in his mind earlier was just a dream? Lin Yuan was somewhat in disbelief. Looking around, Lin Yuan suddenly saw a team of rescue personnel in the distance rushing toward him. They seemed to have discovered the abnormal situation here. Was everything just a dream after all? Lin Yuan felt his weak and powerless body. It was completely different from the him in the dream who could move mountains and seas with a raise of his hand. Forget it. Since the heavens did not let me die and even let me have a dream, then I'll just treat it as a dream. Even if there is no system, so what if there is no sky martial world? Since I, Lin Yuan, have returned, I will not continue to be a coward. Understanding this, Lin Yuan staggered to his feet. Finally, with the help of the rescue team, he walked toward the beach. However, at this time, Lin Yuan's body suddenly trembled. Dane. The end of the book. Regarding the ending of this book, there are many developments. Everything can be attributed to Lin Yuan's dream, or it can be attributed to him having returned after becoming a god in another world. As for what will happen after he returns, it will be up to you. This is an open ending, an ending that is filled with imagination. Lin Yuan's story is still continuing, and our footsteps are also constantly moving forward. Thank you, readers, for your continuous support. Thank you, everyone. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.